Chapter 1752. A melodious hum faintly sounded from the door and entered Noah's ears. Noah raised his eyebrows and began to mutter in his heart. Isn't she already back? Only a pure witch G could become an elf envoy. Thus, in this elven academy, Noah was the only male. However, in the dormitory of the elven academy, two people shared a room. Thus, of course, Noah also had his own roommate. Since there was movement in Noah's room, there was no doubt that this roommate had returned. At that moment, Noah's eyes turned slightly, and he quietly opened the door and slipped in. Heh 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 heh. As soon as he entered the room, the hum became clear and gave a warm feeling. Listening carefully, the melodious hum sounded from the kitchen. Noah quietly slipped to the kitchen door and looked inside. In the kitchen, a young girl wearing an Alicia Elven Academy uniform and an apron was humming a song while cutting ingredients skillfully. Her light golden hair swayed gently, and she seemed to be in a good mood. At first glance, Linley, who was busy in the kitchen, simply looked like the most virtuous housewife. She was full of wife strength and made people have a good impression of her. Who would have thought that this young lady who was busy in the kitchen like a housewife was actually a noble? Furthermore, there was a maid who was supposed to stay in the kitchen and be busy with household chores by her side. However, Linley didn't think that these household chores were the work of a servant. Not only did she do it herself, she even took over all the work of her maid. When he thought of the subtle relationship between Linley and Carol, Noah had a feeling of wanting to complain but didn't know where to start. After looking around the room, Noah realized that there was something wrong with the room. The maid, who was supposed to be cooking in the kitchen, was lying on the sofa at this moment. She was sleeping soundly. She turned over and mumbled as if she was in a dream. "Miss, I'm really hungry. Is the meal not ready yet?" Noah wanted to say it again, but he didn't know where to vent his disgust. Sure enough, this world was full of all kinds of inconceivable phenomena. After leaving this thought, Noah turned his gaze to Linley, who was humming in a good mood and cooking in the kitchen with skillful methods. A mischievous impulse welled up in his heart. Thus, Noah deliberately approached Lynn Silei with footsteps that would not make any sound. When he arrived behind Lynn Silei, he blew a breath of air into Lynn Silei's delicate little ear. Ah! Lynn Silei's shoulders trembled violently, and her ears turned red. She was startled. Noah quickly dodged to the side. Almost at the same time, Linley turned around abruptly and looked behind her. In the end, she didn't see anything. Huh! Lynn Silei was slightly startled. Her clear and sparkling eyes that were like gemstones were filled with deep confusion. No one. Noah, who was hiding behind Linley, calculated the timing and dodged to the side again. At this moment, Linley turned around again with a trace of doubt. Facing the kitchen, she muttered, "Is it the wind? But the wind seems to be hot." Saying this, Linley gently touched her burning ears, her pretty face slightly red as she snorted. "What an annoying wind!" Hearing this muttering, Noah couldn't help but laugh. Why didn't he realize before that this prideful missy was actually so cute? However, the more he thought about it, the stronger Noah's mischievous mood in his heart became. Thus, Noah once again moved his head closer and blew a breath into Linley's other ear. Ah! Linley let out a cute cry. Her other ear quickly turned red, and her slender shoulders trembled even more intensely than before. Noah immediately dodged and dodged to the side again. Noah's timing was very good. Therefore, just as she turned her body, Lynn Silei immediately turned around and looked behind her. Who is it?" Lynn Silei's pretty face flushed red as she looked around and shouted in a panic. "Ha! Carol? Is it you?" Noah, who was still hiding behind Lynn Silei, snickered as he watched Lynn Silei fall into a state of panic. He couldn't help but move his head closer to Lynn Silei's ear, preparing to blow another breath of air on that little ear that had turned red. Unfortunately, this time, an accident that even Noah didn't expect happened. Not knowing if it was because she finally noticed the abnormality behind her, or if it was unintentional, Linley suddenly turned her head. Moreover, she turned her head in the direction where Noah was moving closer to Linley's ear. As a result, one moved his head forward, while the other turned his head back, causing their faces to meet in an instant. The next moment, chirp, accompanied by an extremely soft sound, Noah and Linley opened their eyes wide at the same time. Noah looked at Linley's delicate face that was close at hand, and felt the faint softness from her lips. He was really stunned on the spot. "Oh!" Linley subconsciously called out, but because her lips were firmly blocked, she could only make a vague moan. Although it was purely an accident, it couldn't erase a fact. That was, at this moment, Noah and Linley were indeed kissing by coincidence. In a mouth-to-mouth manner. Time seemed to have paused at this moment, causing Noah and Linley to both open their eyes wide, looking at each other's face that was close at hand, and began to tremble inside. Not knowing how long this scene lasted, Noah and Linley finally reacted at the same time. As if shocked, Noah and Linley suddenly separated and stepped back at the same time. "You!" Linley covered her mouth with one hand, while the other hand pointed at Noah, trembling uncontrollably. Her pretty face quickly turned red at a speed visible to the naked eye, and tears began to appear in her eyes. You, I, Noah stuttered, which was rare, and finally said such a sentence. "I didn't do it on purpose." However, this statement in the current situation couldn't be considered an explanation at all. For Noah, he just had the idea of playing a prank by chance and it was considered a whim. Normally, he wouldn't do this at all. To Lincilii, this rich young lady had her first kiss taken away for no apparent reason. All of a sudden, an unprecedented sense of shame surged in Linley's heart, causing her pretty face to turn red, and tears to appear in the corners of her eyes. However, her body was suffused with a phosphorescent divine power. Seeing this, Noah shouted in his heart, "Oh no!" Then Linley exploded. A gust of cold wind mixed with ice particles suddenly blew from the entire kitchen, rolling to the surroundings. The utensils, ingredients, and cooking utensils in the kitchen were all swept into the cold wind. First, they were frozen into ice, and then like blunt weapons, they flew in all directions under the raging cold wind. Noah hurriedly dodged the incoming blunt weapons, and shouted at Linley, "Wait! Calm down!" Unfortunately, Linley was covering her mouth with a red face, squatting on the ground with tears in the corners of her eyes. She didn't hear Noah's voice at all. Of course, the chaotic Linley didn't hear anything, but that didn't mean that others didn't hear anything either. Such a big commotion in the kitchen was enough to wake Carol up. Miss! Carol ran into the kitchen in a panic. What? What happened?" Before she could finish her sentence, a frozen pot was blown by the cold wind and heavily smashed towards Carol. Clang! Amidst the sound of metal clashing, Carol received a heavy blow to her head. Ugh! Carol only felt stars in front of her eyes, and then she fell down. It was only then that Linley reacted and cried out in alarm. "Carol!" Seeing this chaotic situation, Noah secretly swore in his heart. In the future, he would definitely not play pranks on a whim. Chapter 1753. Ugh! In the room, Carol was lying on the sofa looking dizzy, as if she had not yet woken up from her dizziness. "Carol!" Linley crouched in front of the sofa, looking at Carol with a worried expression, and then glared at Noah. "It's all your fault." Noah was really wronged. Perhaps the incident of him accidentally stealing Linley's first kiss could be said to be Noah's fault, but for Carol to become like this, it was entirely because Linley fell into a state of confusion and carelessly used her divine power, right? However, thinking about it carefully, the reason Linley fell into a state of confusion was also because Noah stole this rich young Miss' first kiss. Therefore, if one were to think about it carefully, it was indeed Noah's fault. Okay, it's my fault. Noah could only raise his hands in surrender. "Just tell me, how should I make it up to you?" "Make it up to you?" Linley pursed her lips and said shyly and angrily. That was my first kiss, the one and only most precious thing. You took my first kiss without permission. Nothing can make it up to you." Noah was immediately speechless. From a sentimental point of view, Linley's words were indeed correct. However, why did it feel like the situation was suddenly very serious? Of course, the one who benefited was Noah. Noah did not lose anything, and even gained, so he had no right to speak. At that moment, Noah could only say so. "Then what do you want?" Linley glared at Noah, her face still slightly red, but suddenly thought of something and clapped her hands fiercely. "If that's the case, then go and steal Claire's first kiss." Noah's brain immediately crashed. Take away Claire's first kiss? What kind of situation was this? Are you sure you've calmed down? Noah could only force out such a sentence. What's the point of stealing Claire's first kiss? Because I'm the only one who lost my precious first kiss. Isn't that unfair? Lynn Siley said indignantly. That would be letting Claire off too easily. That's why you have to steal her first kiss. That way Claire and I will be even. What kind of logic was this? No, at least Noah knew what Lindley was thinking. To put it simply, this rich young miss who viewed Claire as her sworn enemy must have thought that she had lost her first kiss while Claire still had her precious first kiss. That was why she suddenly said this, right? But isn't there something wrong with the comparison? I don't know what the point of doing this is. Noah rubbed his forehead and said directly. So please allow me to refuse. You actually dare to refuse the order of the daughter of the Lorenfrost family. Lindley's gaze towards Noah became more and more unfriendly. How dare you, and how irresponsible you are. Oh. Noah raised his eyebrows and said with a smile that wasn't a smile. In other words, you want me to take responsibility? Who? Who wants you to take responsibility? Lindley's pretty face turned red, and she shouted in embarrassment and anger. You want to marry into my Lorenfrost family? You're still too early. Marry into your family? Noah said in shock. It's just a kiss and you're talking about marriage? Lynn Seeley was infuriated by his words. What do you mean it's just a kiss? Don't you know how important a kiss is to an elf envoy? Noah only remembered after being reminded by Lindley. For which G and high-ranking elves, a kiss represented the most sacred ceremony. For example, when Noah and Aster made a vow to be together forever, the way they did it was by kissing. Many retired elf envoys would even use their last bit of strength to make a kiss vow when they entered into marriage with their other half. The vow and ceremony made after a kiss was witnessed by the elf king and absolutely could not be violated. Once violated, no matter how powerful the elf envoy was, they would not be able to contract with elves anymore. In serious cases, even their divine power would gradually dissipate, and they would become an ordinary person. Therefore, for Lindley, this kiss with Noah might really be very important. It was important enough to be involved in marriage. When Lindley said that nothing can make up for it, it was not for emotional purposes. Even if it was for a rational reason, it was the most practical. Noah realized how serious a mistake he had made, and his expression became somewhat helpless. Okay, I take back what I just said, but what's done is done. Do you want me to give you another kiss? What? Lindley said in embarrassment and anger. You really are unforgivable. Seeing that Lindley was about to explode again, Noah was shocked. Just when Noah was thinking whether he should ignore everything and leave first on the sofa, Carol suddenly let out a soft moan. Carol? Lindley was slightly delighted, and hurriedly squatted in front of the sofa and said softly, Carol, are you awake? Seeing that Lindley's attention was distracted by Carol, Noah breathed a sigh of relief. Young miss. Carol seemed to still be in a daze. She clutched her head as she spoke. Why do I feel a little headache? Is it just a little painful? Lindley asked considerately. Other than the headache, do you feel anything else? Other feelings? Carol still had a confused look on her face. Then she opened her mouth and asked. I'm also a little hungry. I know, I'll prepare something for you to eat first. Lindley nodded repeatedly. You should rest first. Okay. Carol responded, then closed her eyes and fell asleep. Noah, who silently watched this scene from the side, could not help but sigh. You're quite good to Carol. More than just good. Clearly, Carol had the title of a maid and didn't know how to do any household chores, but Lindley helped Carol solve all of her household chores. She even took care of this somewhat useless maid like a nanny. Generally speaking, this had long surpassed the category of good. However, Lindley said with some pride, as if it was a matter of course, the daughter of the Lorenfrost family will not treat her servants badly. As a noble, helping the people around her is a matter of course. Although it was such a matter, that was your maid, helping her wash clothes and cook was a matter of course? Noah resisted the urge to complain and spread his hands. Nobles are really amazing. I can only express admiration. It's good that you know. Lindley nodded proudly, turned around, and just as she was about to enter the kitchen, she paused. Immediately, Lindley turned her head with a slightly red face, and glared at Noah. Remember what happened today, and in the future don't blow into my ear. Leaving this sentence, Lindley went straight into the kitchen, her pair of ears turning red. Seeing this, Noah scratched his cheek and muttered in his heart as if he had understood something. Could it be that the ear is Lindley's sensitive point? Why did he suddenly feel like he had discovered something big enough to be silenced? That must be an illusion, right? Must be. It didn't take long for Lindley to finish preparing the meal. However, Carol was already asleep and did not get up. Lindley didn't disturb Carol's rest. She put down the food she had prepared and planned to heat it up for Carol when she woke up before giving it to her. Lindley also prepared a portion for Noah. This surprised Noah. Noah thought that Lindley already held a grudge against him. Now it seemed that this girl was indeed a good person. Of course, on the surface Lindley said so. It's just convenient. I didn't make it especially for you. This sentence, no matter how he heard it, sounded arrogant. Noah did not untactfully expose her. It was already good enough to have something to eat. The meal Lindley prepared was an ordinary stew. Moreover, it tasted better than many of the chefs in high-class restaurants. Noah could not help but eat 2 more mouthfuls, and did not stop until his stomach was full. Looking at Noah eating so enthusiastically, Lindley seemed to be a little happy. Suddenly Lindley asked, "Do you have any wishes that you want to fulfill at the Elven Sword Dance Festival?" Chapter 1754. Do you have any wish that you wish to fulfill at the Elven Sword Dance Festival? The sudden question made Noah, who was enjoying his meal, pause in his actions. He raised his head and looked at Lindley in confusion. "Why are you suddenly asking such a question?" "Because I find it unbelievable," Lindley said straightforwardly. "Undoubtedly, you are the only male elven envoy, and you have the same sword dance as Rena Subble. Your strength is outstanding, and your contracted elven envoy is also a humanoid elf of the highest level. You are blessed in all aspects, but I have never heard of an existence like you on the continent. Logically speaking, with your uniqueness, you shouldn't have been able to hide until now." In fact, this was one of the reasons why Gray and Vaz were surprised by the appearance of a male elven envoy like Noah. As the only male elven envoy other than Solomon, Noah had too many reasons to be the focus of the entire Ordesia Empire, and even the entire continent. However, he was only discovered at this age. This was truly unbelievable. If it is because you have the same nature as the Demon King and have been hiding your identity to avoid suspicion, then it is understandable. But if that is the case, why would you suddenly appear in this academy, and not hesitate to reveal your identity? Lindley said confidently. "Thinking about it this way, I can only think of a reason why you did not hesitate to reveal your identity to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Since you did not hesitate to reveal your identity to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, you must have a wish that must be fulfilled, right?" Under normal circumstances, Lindley's statement could not be said to be wrong. It was a pity that Lindley didn't know that Noah hadn't been hiding his identity all this while. The reason why he didn't reveal his sensitive identity as a male elf to the world was entirely because he hadn't lived in this world before. Not to mention, before coming to this world, Noah was not even an elven envoy. It was only after he came to this world and met Gray and Vaz that he absorbed a bit of Gray's divine power that he obtained the qualifications to become an elven envoy. Only Noah knew about this. Even Gray and Vaz, who had led him to the door of the elf messenger, didn't know about this. Therefore, Lindley naturally could not guess this reason. "Actually, I really don't have any special wishes that I want to fulfill." Noah hesitated for a moment, and finally revealed the inside story. "I participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival because of 2 reasons. 2 reasons? Lindley asked curiously. "What 2 reasons?" "One of the reasons is that I met Gray Vaz by chance. She provided me with some conveniences and taught me the skills of elves, so I agreed to participate in this Elven Sword Dance Festival," Noah said with a shrug. "The other reason I think you should know is because of Liliana Subble." At the mention of this name, Lindley couldn't help but have some longing in her eyes. It had to be said that Lena Schubel had a lot of charm and fame for the modern elven envoys. At least, Noah had never seen any elven envoys who didn't express heartfelt admiration and respect for the strongest sword dancer. Of course, Lindley was the same. It was because of this that Lindley found it even more unbelievable. Why is a man like you so close to the idol of the shamans? Lindsay Lei said with some envy and jealousy. Undoubtedly, I'm just a pervert. Who's a pervert? Noah rolled his eyes. Does being related to Liliana Subble mean that I have bad intentions? Allah? Are you trying to say that you're not a pervert? Lindsay Lei glared at Noah, her pretty face blushing. You obviously stole my first kiss and breathed into my ear. You even did it twice. That's just an accident. Noah's mouth twitched, and he muttered in a low voice. Also, who knew that your ear is your sensitive point? Lindsay Lei looked over in confusion. What are you muttering over there about? Nothing. Noah sighed, and continued to eat while casually asking. Then, why are you participating in the Elven Sword Dance Festival? When these words came out of Noah's mouth, Lindsay Lei's expression froze, and she fell silent. Noah, who noticed the abnormality, glanced at Lindsay Lei and changed the topic. Well, I'm just asking. If it's not convenient to say, then don't say it. Actually, it's not something that needs to be hidden. Lindsay Lei was silent for a while before sighing. I want to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival because I want to save my little sister. Little sister? Noah said in surprise. You have a little sister? To be exact, I have 2 little sisters. I'm the eldest daughter in the family, and the one I want to save is my second sister. Lindsay Lei's voice sounded a little sad. My second sister. Yusha is currently in a deep slumber, and she may never wake up. Noah frowned, put down the utensils in his hands and looked at Lindsay Lei. Under Noah's gaze, Lindsay Lei smiled helplessly and explained. My younger sister, Wuxia, was an excellent witch who was highly recommended by the Divine Rights Institute. But a few years ago, during a sacrificial ceremony for the Water Elf King, my younger sister made a mistake and angered the Elf King. She was imprisoned by the Elf King in a curse ice that would never melt. Hearing this, Noah's frown deepened. Was it the Elf King again? Claire's sister betrayed the Elf King and caused the entire Ordisia Empire to suffer a devastating blow. Lindsay Lei's sister angered the Elf King, and her entire person was sealed in cursed ice that would never melt. In addition, the previous Elven War led to the reincarnation of the Dark Elf King, the birth of the Demon King, and the connection between Liliana Subble and Noah. Why was there the shadow of the Elf King everywhere? Moreover, it wasn't anything good. As the ruler of this world, what kind of existence was the Elf King? While Noah was deep in thought, Lindsay Lei continued to explain. In order to save Wuxia from the cursed ice, my father once recruited many excellent elven ambassadors of the Empire and asked them to try to break the ice, but it ended in failure. Since then, Wuxia has been in a deep sleep and it has been a few years now. After all, the ice cast by the Elf King wasn't something that human ambassadors could do anything about. So that's why you want to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival? Noah suddenly understood. Use the wish of the Elven Sword Dance Festival to save the child called Wuxia. That's right. Lindsay Lei nodded vigorously. The winner of the Elven Sword Dance Festival can fulfill a wish. My wish is for the Water Elf King to grant forgiveness and release my sister Wuxia. I see. Noah sighed. Then you're really similar to Claire in all aspects. Claire participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival for her sister, and to find out the truth behind her sister's betrayal. Lindsay Lei participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival for her sister, and to release her from the eternal ice. The two were indeed very similar in all aspects. Thinking of this, Noah silently swallowed the last piece of meat. Then he looked up and gazed at Lindsay Lei. To an elf ambassador, a kiss is the most sacred contract and ritual, right? Lindsay Lei was slightly taken aback. Under such circumstances, Noah suddenly smiled and said this. Since that's the case, Lindsay Lei, I promise you that I will obtain victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival and help you save your sister. Saying this, Noah extended a finger and pressed it on Lindsay Lei's lips. I've already performed a sacred ceremony with you and established a contract. Therefore, I will definitely fulfill this promise. This will be my compensation to you, all right? Feeling the touch of Noah's finger on her lips and seeing Noah's deep, dark eyes and smiling expression, Lindsay Lei's heartbeat involuntarily sped up. Then, like a well-behaved wife, Linley nodded her head with a red face. Seeing Lindsay Lei like this, Noah couldn't help but smile. As expected, This girl was much cuter than he'd imagined. Chapter 1755. The next day, Noah woke up in the dazzling sunlight. Ugh! As soon as he woke up, Noah heard a pleasant voice, which instantly woke up his somewhat muddled brain. He lowered his head and looked at his arms. There was a naked elf girl with skin as white and smooth as pearls. She had a petite figure, but beautiful long silver hair that reached her waist. She was like a koala bear tightly hugging Noah. Her face, which usually did not reveal much emotion, had a rare look of serenity. Looking at the incomparably cute elf girl in his arms, Noah bitterly smiled while gently stroking Aster's soft silver hair and muttered, "This is a scene that I haven't seen in a long time." Ever since Noah returned to the world of fairy tale, Aster had never woken up in Noah's arms like this. The reason was very simple. After returning to the world of fairy tale, Noah rarely slept alone. There was always Mira and Lisanna by his bed. Ever since he got married to Mira and Lisanna, Noah had never stayed alone in the house. Under such circumstances, Aster no longer came out to sleep with him. Perhaps it was because Noah had not slept alone for a long time, and had returned to this world that originally belonged to Aster. That was why Aster came out to sleep with him as usual. That was why her expression was so peaceful. Although sleeping without clothes is still something that people can't agree with, his words brought forth another voice. That is only the proof of the Holy Sword Fairy's dependence on you. You should be proud, my fated one. There was only one person who would call Noah that. Therefore, Noah looked to the side without any surprise. He saw that at the window, Athena was pulling open the curtain with one hand. Her coquettish snake eyes were looking at the elf forest in the distance. She seemed to be talking to herself. So this is the world where the elves live? What? Noah asked without leaving a trace. You don't like this world? Or rather, it's the opposite. Athena shook her head, her eyes fixed on the elven forest outside. After coming to this world, I feel like I've returned to my mother's body. Perhaps it's because I was reincarnated with reference to the existence of the Holy Sword spirits. So I can't help but feel a sense of belonging to this world. Isn't that a good thing? Noah smiled. You once ran against the world as the god of perverse Tao. Now that you feel a sense of belonging in this world, it proves that you have been accepted by the world once more. Theoretically speaking, the gods that were born from the stars should be in existence that is one with the world. As a god, even if they were to turn into a body that goes against the world, it would still be a joke that no one would dare to agree with. Athena said calmly, but then changed the topic. If it was in the past, I would definitely think that way. But after knowing about your existence, I finally understood the truth of the world and how narrow-minded I was in the past. I'm not that arrogant to talk about the truth of the world with you, the beloved child that was born from millions of worlds. Even your existence was formed from the fragments of the original world. Athena glanced at Noah. So, I'll admit to what you said. Noah couldn't help but laugh. Then, he gently hugged the naked elf girl in his arms, got up slightly, and looked at Athena. In that case, would you like to meet my companions? In other words, Aster and Athena didn't like to interact with others under normal circumstances. Even if it was Mila and Lisanna, it was the same. Apart from Noah, the others weren't elven users and didn't know how to interact with elves. The only one who could communicate with elves was the pure Magus G. Noah was the only male elven user, so he was an exception. Under such circumstances, Aster and Athena were able to interact with others to a certain extent because of Noah. They also had a strong sense of self. For elves who didn't have a strong sense of self and only had the intelligence of wild beasts, it was impossible for them to interact with beings that weren't Magus G, let alone low-ranked elves who didn't even have any intelligence. However, it was different in this world. Alicia Elven Academy didn't have much, but the number of elven users and elves was definitely not small. Therefore, interacting with elven users shouldn't be an unpleasant thing for Athena, who was an elf. Unfortunately, Athena still refused. Although I'm interested in the elven users of this world, I'd rather observe them one-sidedly than interact with them. Athena's beautiful snake eyes were filled with arrogance that hadn't been seen in a long time. Even if I'm no longer a goddess, I'm still in existence of the highest level among elves. I'm not inferior to the Holy Sword elves over there. That's why I don't want any random elven user to get close to me. After saying that, Athena's body turned into light particles and floated back to Noah's bedside. She then condensed into a platinum sword and laid down quietly. Seeing this, Noah couldn't help but feel helpless. However, Athena's words weren't wrong. Although elven users had the right to interact with elves, it was only a right. If any elven user could form a good relationship with a high-ranked elf, there wouldn't be so many elven users who could only form contracts with middle-ranked or low-ranked elves. Although Linley and the others were excellent elven users who could form contracts with high-ranked elves, it wasn't that easy to form a contract with a humanoid elf of the highest rank. At least until now, other than himself, Noah had only seen two people who had formed contracts with high-ranked elves. One was Lillian Ashubal. The other was Grey Vaz. The former was the strongest sword dancer, the idol of all the witches in the continent. The latter was the strongest elven user, the peak of all elven users in the continent. Only these two had formed contracts with high-ranked elves. One could imagine how difficult it was to form a contract with a high-ranked elf. In addition, Athena was a goddess, so she naturally wouldn't bother to form a cheap exchange. Not to mention Athena, even Aster didn't have a good relationship with Linley and the others. They could only be considered acquaintances and were somewhat familiar with each other. And this was only because Linley and the others had interacted with Aster for a period of time, so it was difficult for them to gain Aster's recognition. From this, it could be seen how difficult it was to form a relationship with a high-ranked elf. Noah was able to obtain the contracts of the two highest-ranking elves. Furthermore, one of them had sworn an oath with him for eternity, while the other was his authority, and it was almost impossible for her to betray him. This could really be said to be a blessing of 3 lifetimes. Well, it's much better than when I was the god of disobedience. When she was still the god of disobedience, because she was devoured by the unruliness of her path, Athena treated humans as dirt and killed them whenever she wanted. Now, Athena was only unwilling to form cheap exchanges with humans, which was already very good. Thinking of this, Noah patted Aster's slender back. "Aster, it's time to get up." "Ugh." Aster blinked and then slowly opened his eyes. He rubbed his eyes sleepily and cutely yawned. "Master, good morning." "Good morning." Noah patted Aster's head dotingly. "It's time to get up." "Okay." Aster got up with a trace of sleepiness. In the next moment, Aster was like Athena. Amidst a burst of light particles, he turned into a small silver sword and quietly laid in front of Noah. As expected, it's hard to form a relationship with a high-ranked elf. Noah had no choice but to leave such a comment. Wearing the only male uniform in the Elven Academy, Noah came out of his bedroom and went to the living room. As soon as he opened the door, the aroma of black tea wafted into Noah's nose. Noah's eyes couldn't help but brighten. "Oh, it smells good. Is there a share for me?" As soon as he said this, several intense gazes landed on Noah's face, causing Noah to be stunned. Chapter 1756. Only now did Noah notice. In the living room at a small round table, 4 girls were sitting opposite each other, holding cups of black tea in their hands. There were some refreshments on the table in front of them, as if they were having a tea party. Among the 4 girls besides Lindsley, the other 3 were also Noah's acquaintances. Of course, apart from these 3 girls, Carol was also present, but she stood behind Lindsley, looking like a standard maid. Looking at the 3 girls sitting with Lindsley, Noah was surprised. "So you're all back?" Of the 3 girls, one had flame-like twin ponytails, one had long purple hair, and the last one had a white ribbon tying her sky-blue hair into a single ponytail. They were the other members of the fairy tale team. Claire, Fayanna, and Alice were in a group of 3. "So slow," Claire said in a petulant manner, as if she was throwing a tantrum. "Even if we haven't resumed our lessons, you've slept for too long. However, in order not to disturb your rest, we temporarily held a tea party here." Fayanna smiled mischievously. "Of course, boys have a lot of trouble in the morning. I know about this. I hope I didn't disturb you?" "Boys have a lot of trouble in the morning." Alice frowned, looking at Noah with some confusion. "Boys have a lot of trouble in the morning? Do you need my help?" "Help?" Fayanna looked at Alice in surprise. Then she giggled. "I didn't expect the captain of the knights to be so daring. It's really surprising." "Daring?" Alice was confused. "What does that mean?" "Fayanna, can you not speak in riddles?" Claire said with dissatisfaction. What kind of trouble can boys have in the morning? Is it daring to just help a little? That's right. Lindsley drank her tea elegantly, also puzzled. Could it be that boys hide something scary in the morning? Well, for us it is indeed a bit scary. Fianna couldn't help but laugh. If you're curious, you can ask Noah if he can show you. Hearing this, Carol, who was standing behind Lindsley, couldn't help but laugh secretly. The three girls, who didn't know what was going on, turned their attention back to Noah, their eyes full of curiosity. Claire said directly, "That's it, let us see. See your head." Noah's eyes twitched. Are you girls really talking about such an unhealthy topic early in the morning? Unhealthy topic. The three pure girls immediately blushed. Fianna. Claire glared at Fianna with a red face. So you're talking about the topic of sex? Ah. Fiona showed an innocent expression. Is it still too early for you? Of course. Fianna's Fianna, you're shameless. You still don't have the self-awareness of being a princess. Lincili's face was red as she retorted. This is unbelievable. Seeing Claire, Lindsley, Fianna, and Alice quarreling, Noah sighed inwardly. It's been so long, but you guys are still the same. This sentence immediately attracted the glares of the four girls. If that's the case, aren't you the same? Claire. After all, it's only been a month. Fianna. I don't think there's anything wrong with me being like this. Alice. As a noble, I've always been leading by example. There's nothing to pick on. Lindsley. These were the rebuttals of the four girls. In this regard, Noah really wanted to say that in terms of personality, the four of them had some areas that he couldn't complain about. But there was no benefit in saying this, so forget it. All right, Mr. Noah, please don't stand there. Come and sit here. Carol pulled out a seat for Noah with a smile. The ladies have been waiting for you for a long time. Not knowing if it was intentional, Carol helped Noah move his seat to Lindsley's side with a smile on her face. Except for Noah. No one else noticed this small movement. They continued to drink their black tea with a look of indifference. Noah could only shrug and sit next to Lindsley under Carol's giggling. Then Noah asked his four teammates. Since you're all back, that means you've all finished your tasks, right? The reason why the fairy tale team had postponed a month's ranking competition and applied for a month's leave was because the four girls had their own matters to attend to. Claire took this opportunity to visit her parents, who she hadn't had the chance to visit before, and who were still in prison. Lindsley, Alice, and Fianna returned to their homes and reported the good news of qualifying for the Elven Sword Dance Festival to their families. Because of the long journey and the need to socialize due to their status, the four girls needed a month's time to complete this goal. Since they had rushed back, it meant that there were no problems. No matter what, the Elven Sword Dance Festival is about to start. How could we not come back? Claire said as she puffed out her chest that didn't undulate at all. Also, in this month I was allowed to enter the library that my family used to own. I learned a lot from there and my strength improved a lot. How much can you improve if you only study by yourself? Lindsley said to Claire, not to be outdone. I also asked the elven knights in my family to help me train. My strength will definitely improve more than Claire's. I also retrained my skills a little, Alice said with a serious expression. At this time, every bit of improvement counts. That's something we can't do anything about. Fianna sighed deeply. After all, if we want to emerge victorious in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, we have to defeat the strongest sword dancer. The girls all fell silent. Noah knew that the four girls had their own reasons for participating in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Claire wanted to understand the truth behind her sister's betrayal of the Elven King. Lindsley wanted to rescue her frozen sister. Alice wanted to inherit Versilia's wish. Fianna wanted to take back everything she had lost when she was demoted to a lost elven princess. In other words, the four of them had their own reasons for not losing. However, his opponent was the existence known as the strongest sword dancer, the target of all elven envoys. Would they be able to defeat such an existence? Not to mention these four girls, even if it was anyone else, they wouldn't have much confidence. However, Noah still wanted to say, "Leave Rena Subble to me." The group of four girls immediately cast their gazes on Noah at the same time. Do you have a chance of winning? Alice couldn't help but ask. Although you are indeed very strong, can you guarantee that you can defeat Rinasubble? Indeed, I can't guarantee it because I still don't know the full extent of Lianasuble's strength. But no matter what, I did have a brief confrontation with her, even if we weren't serious at that time. Noah smiled indifferently. Moreover, you aren't the only ones who have grown in this month. I also have a trump card. Trump card? The girls were curious. What trump card? Noah touched the elven mark on the back of his hand, and sensed the aura of Athena on it. He said with a deep meaning, "You will know in the future." Seeing that Noah didn't seem to want to reveal it directly, the girls didn't pursue the matter. In any case, Noah's strength was indeed very strong. There was no doubt about this. Since Noah could deal with Rinasubble, it couldn't be better. Thinking back to the beautiful sword dance between Noah and Ren, Claire, Lindsley, Fayanna, and Alice were fascinated. Just like that, the day of the Elven Sword Dance Festival gradually arrived. Chapter 1757. On this day, the sun was shining brightly and there were no clouds in the sky. The weather was not bad. Early in the morning, the entire Elven Academy was bustling with noise and excitement. Almost all the students came out of their dormitories and started walking in one direction. That direction was the direction of the gate that led to the Elemental Elves' world. The largest ceremony of the Elven Sword Dance Festival was not held in the modern world, but in the Elemental Elves' world. And it was the Elemental Elves' world's Saint Realm. In the Elemental Elves' world there were 5 Saint Realms. The 5 Saint Realms belonged to the 5 Elven Kings. In the Saint Realms people could mine special elven ores. That elven ores were the blood of the Elven King. One had to know that ordinary elven ores could only seal a portion of the elven power and use it. Its effects were very limited. However, the blood of the Elven King could seal a portion of the power of high elves and unleash great power and effects. It was a true national treasure that even people with money and authority could not buy. Once the self-proclaimed Demon King Geoinzak, who was actually a fake, used the blood of the Elven King that sealed the power of the Elven King, who could control a large number of elves, to disguise himself as an elven envoy and appeared in front of Noah. Later on, that guy almost died under Versilia's bombardment. The blood of the Elven King was taken away by Versilia, and she used it to make a deal with the merchant of the Skeleton Alliance, Vivian, to transplant a large number of spell engravings. That kind of national treasure could allow an ordinary person to control a large number of elves. Its value was enough to exchange for a large number of spell engravings. Its value could be imagined. The blood of the Elven King was an elven ore that could only be mined in the Saint Realm. However, only which G of the Gods Parliament who served the Elven King could enter the Saint Realm. However, during the Elven Sword Dance Festival, the Saint Realm would be open to ordinary people. In other words, every Elven Sword Dance Festival was held in the Elemental Elves' world's Saint Realm. As the only gate in the Elven Academy that could lead to the Elemental Elves' world, the students naturally gathered there. This was because today was the day that the top 3 teams would go to the venue of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. In one of the rooms in the dormitory of the Crow class, Noah was looking at a pile of messy suitcases in front of him. He was speechless. Is it necessary to bring so much luggage? In response to Noah's sigh, Claire, Lindley, Fianna, and Alice all raised their heads and looked into the distance, as if they didn't know anything. However, there was no doubt that all the luggage here belonged to the 4 girls. Noah narrowed his eyes, squatted down, and rummaged through the luggage. What are you doing? Claire. How dare you rummage through a lady's belongings? How rude. Lindsley. Are you looking for our undergarments? Fianna asked. WH? Are you that kind of person? Alice. The group of 4 girls all protested loudly. However, Noah didn't care about them at all. He continued rummaging through the luggage and found a bunch of messy things. Among them there were beads, cups, fans, whips, candles, and even animal ears and tails. Looking at these things, Noah's mouth twitched, and he looked at the 4 girls with a strange expression. Whose things are these? Claire, Lindley, and Alice immediately shook their heads. Only Fianna didn't mince her words. These are all mine. Let me ask first. Noah narrowed his eyes and looked at Fianna. What are you going to do with these things? These are prayer tools that will be used in the Kagura ritual, Fianna answered frankly. These are things that might come in handy. Prayer tools. Noah looked at Fianna suspiciously. Really? Do you think I'm lying? Fianna teased with a smile. Or do you think these things have some special uses? Wasn't that natural? Beads, cups, and fans were fine, but what about whips, candles, and even animal ears and tails? They didn't look like prayer tools but sex toys. However, Noah didn't have any knowledge in the Kagura ritual, and Fianna's words had no loopholes, so he couldn't refute. So Noah had no choice but to put those things back into the box, and took out a large number of dolls from another box. That's mine. Alice raised her hand weakly and said embarrassedly, "If the journey is lonely, these dolls can come in handy." If the journey is lonely, they can come in handy? What are you going to do with these dolls? If you really feel lonely, borrowing the so-called prayer tools from Fianna should be more useful, right? Noah resisted the urge to complain, silently put all the dolls into the box, and took out another box. There was a tea set in this box. "This is mine." Lindsley combed her hair and said matter-of-factly, "As a noble, we have to maintain elegance no matter when and where. Not to mention if the journey is lonely, we can hold a tea party. This is a necessary item." Lonely journey again? Just how afraid are you girls of being lonely? Noah was speechless. He could only put down the box, take out another box, and open it. As a result, Noah was dumbfounded. Because in this box there were books. Not ordinary books. At least that was the title on the cover that Noah saw. Master and Maid. The Kidnapped Princess. The Use of My Holy Sword. Whips and Candles. Just by looking at these titles, Noah understood. How bad were the contents of these books? Ah! At the same time, Claire shouted with a red face and rushed over. She closed the box and threw it at Noah in exasperation. "Who told you to open this box?" Noah hurriedly dodged Claire's peerless dance and also shouted, "Who told you to bring that terrible thing?" Terrible thing? Lindsley was curious. "What terrible thing did you bring? Let me see." Oh, Claire is bolder than I thought." Fianna was full of interest. "Lend it to me." Did you bring something shameless?" Alice's pretty face was red, and she shouted while gnashing her teeth. "Don't bring me that kind of thing. Do you want us to be ridiculed? I'll confiscate it all." Saying this, the three girls pounced in Claire's direction. "Wah! Don't take my things." "Claire. Claire's things are my things." "Lindsley. What's wrong with letting me see?" "Fianna. Confiscated. All confiscated." "Alice. Get out of my way. Do you want to turn into charcoal?" "Claire." Suddenly the four girls were in a mess, tangled together, and even rolled on the ground. Their skirts were flipped up, and the beautiful scenery inside was seen by Noah. Noah could only turn his head and look at the scenery outside the window. He covered his face as if he couldn't bear to look at it. What kind of teammates are these? Although the whole process was very noisy, the girls still knew their limits. When it was about time to set off, they stopped playing, took their luggage, and walked towards the elemental elven realm's gate. When Noah's group arrived at the gate, there were already many students gathered there. These students were all here to send off the participants of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Unfortunately, no one in Noah's group came to send them off. There was no other reason. They didn't have any other friends in Alicia Elven Academy. Only Alice exchanged a few pleasantries with the members of the Wind King Knights before bidding them farewell. Clank! At a certain moment, the gate to the elemental elven realm bloomed with light. Only at this moment, the gate to the elemental elven realm was open. Noah's group looked at each other, and then followed the other two groups into the light. Chapter 1758. This place was a forest. It was a forest with lush trees. The species of trees were a little strange, and they couldn't be found in the modern world. In the forest there was a vast lake. The water in the lake was very clear, so clear that the surface of the water was as bright as a mirror. Whether it was the forest or the lake, they were all emitting a faint light. Like fireflies, the light floated in the air, creating a very dreamy atmosphere. Upon closer inspection, there was actually a ship docked on the lake. It was a ship with a streamlined cabin like a whale, but the surface wasn't made of steel but of wood. It wasn't an ordinary ship, but an airship. In front of the airship, a group of teachers from the Elven Academy of Alicia were lined up neatly. The person in the lead was the principal of the Elven Academy of Alicia, Grey Vath. Clank! In the forest, a ring-like square formation suddenly bloomed with light. All the teachers of the Elven Academy of Alicia, including Grey Vath, looked up and looked over. In the light, a group of students in pure white uniforms slowly took shape in the void and appeared from the square formation. Noah opened his eyes. As soon as he opened his eyes, Noah met Grey Vath's eyes. Grey Vath stared at Noah, and then led the teachers over. The students' faces immediately tensed up. They stood up straight, and traces of nervousness appeared on their faces. It wasn't only because the person in the lead was the principal of the Elven Academy of Alicia, but also because the most powerful elven envoy on the continent was right in front of them. The students didn't know that Grey Vath had lost her ability as an elven envoy a month ago. However, even if she lost her ability as an elven envoy, Grey Vath's prestige still couldn't be underestimated. Next, you will represent the Audiobook Empire and go to the holy realm of Ragnar Yith. Grey Vath's sharp gaze swept across the students as she spoke. Ragnar Yith is the territory of the Wind Elf King, and it is also the venue of this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival. The last time the Elven Sword Dance Festival was held there was 74 years ago. In other words, it has been 74 years since anyone other than the House of Gods has entered there. Do you see the airship on the other side of the lake? Grey and Vath pointed in the direction of the airship. Next, you will board that ship, which will take you to the holy realm of Ragnar Yith. Everyone's eyes immediately turned to the airship. Under such circumstances, Gravath continued to speak. That ship doesn't belong to the Alicia Elven Academy, nor does it belong to the Audiobook Empire. That's why there are already teams from several countries on it. Don't embarrass yourself if you follow them to the venue. Otherwise, you'll become the shame of the entire Audiobook Empire. Hearing this, the expressions of the group of students became even more nervous. At this moment, Grey and Vath looked at the teacher beside her. Distribute the information. A teacher immediately nodded and distributed 3 sets of information to the captains of the 3 teams. Noah also received a share of the loot. This is some information about the teams of the other countries that the Empire has gathered. I'm giving it to you now. I hope that it will be of help to you. Also, I hope that you won't have any regrets during the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Grey and Vath looked at everyone. That's all I want to say. Is everyone clear? Yes. The young girls shouted in unison. Very good. Grey and Vath nodded. Then she led the teachers to the side. Then, board the airship to the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Everyone looked at each other in unison. Then one by one they stepped forward and walked towards the ship. Noah also led Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice forward with the other 4 girls. When Noah passed by Grey and Vath, a soft voice entered his ears. I'm counting on you. Noah's footsteps paused for a moment. Then, he recovered without a trace and boarded the airship as if nothing had happened. Just like that, under the gaze of Grey, Vath, and the teachers, the airship slowly floated up and turned around, flying towards the other side of the sky. After boarding the airship, the 3 teams from Alicia Elven Academy split up. On the airship, no matter which country they were from, every team was allocated a cabin. The walls were all made of marble, and the floor was covered with a red velvet carpet embroidered with beautiful embroidery. Undoubtedly, this airship was made of wood, but the interior was made of marble. It was somewhat inconceivable. As soon as they entered the cabin, the 4 young ladies neatly laid on the sofa, as if they were exhausted, and sprawled on the sofa. Seeing this, Noah was helpless. Grey Vath just said that there are teams from other countries on this airship. She told us not to embarrass ourselves. You guys are like this, aren't you taking it too lightly? Does it matter? Claire said lazily. Anyway, it's in the room. No one will see. It doesn't matter if we relax a little, right? The other young ladies all nodded and expressed the same opinion. Noah sighed and sat down on the sofa. He began to flip through the information given by the Academy. The information did indeed record the information of the teams from other countries. Noah looked at this information seriously until he turned to a page. Looking at the information recorded on it, Noah exclaimed in surprise. Liana Subble is representing the Alphys Empire? That one sentence stirred up everyone's reaction. What? The group of young girls stood up in shock. The Alphys Empire. It was a small country sandwiched between the Ordizia Empire and the Draco Duchy of Draco. The country mainly produced elven ores mined from mines. However, they did not make money from elven ores. Instead, they made a fortune from the mining and trading of magical equipment. The so-called magical equipment referred to some tools that were different from normal tools. Some of these tools had special effects, while some had sealed elves inside them. They were very precious, especially the magical equipment that had sealed elves inside them. They were even more precious. After all, sealed elves were usually very powerful elves. Tools that had powerful elves inside them, no matter who it was, would be tempted. The Alphys Empire was a country that specialized in mining magical equipment that had been passed down since ancient times from various ruins and sold them, thus becoming rich. In addition, this country also secretly provided elves to other big countries and sold them as goods, thus making a lot of profit. Moreover, the headquarters of the black market merchant organization, the Skeleton Alliance, was also located in this country. Therefore, the Alphys Empire was a country that was very popular. The rumors that spread from this country were basically all negative. Why? Linley was very surprised. Why is that Lena Schubel representing the theocracy of Alphys? That's right. Alice frowned. How did that small country with only negative rumors get involved with the strongest sword dancer? That's impossible, right? Even Phaeana was doubtful. That person would not fight for such a country. That's right. Even Claire was on her side. Is there a mistake somewhere? While the girls were surprised, Noah remembered one of the negative rumors in the Alphys Empire. Is that the origin of the Demon King's faith? The Demon King's faith. It meant that the Demon King was the object of faith. Just like how some people believed in terrorism, the Demon King who had brought unimaginable disasters to the whole continent also had his own faith. The idea of the Demon King's faith began to appear in the Alphys Empire. In addition, the capital of the country was the birthplace of Demon King Solomon. The believers of the Demon King firmly believed that Demon King Solomon would reincarnate and come to the Alphys Empire again, leading the country and ruling the whole continent. Therefore, the Alphys Empire was the base of the believers of the Demon King. Could it be that Lena Schubel was representing the Alphys theocracy because of this? Chapter 1759. Although she was not a male, it was a fact that Lena Schubel had inherited the power of the Dark Elf King and could control it freely. In other words, there were definitely many people who believed that Lena Schubel was the Demon King. The Alphys Empire was the headquarters of magic believers and the birthplace of the former Demon King Solomon. In that case, as the Demon King, it was not strange for Lena Schubel to have a relationship with the Alphys Empire. Not to mention, Lena Schubel's contracted elf was Lestia, one of the contracted elves of Demon King Solomon. As the contracted elf of Demon King Solomon, Lestia should be very clear about the situation of the Alphys Empire. It was not strange for her to be able to have a relationship with the Alphys Empire. Thinking of this, Noah browsed through the information about Lena Schubel and confirmed the name of Lena Schubel's team. The team name is Purgatory Apostles? How should he put it? This team name did not have the style of Lena Schubel at all. Instead, it gave people a feeling that it was very suitable for the Alphys Empire. At this moment, dong! Accompanied by a dull thud, the entire cabin began to shake violently. Claire, Lindsley, Viviana, and Alice did not have time to react. Caught off guard, they screamed subconsciously and all fell to the ground. Among them, Lindsley directly fell on Noah, as if she was sitting on Noah's arms. In a standard riding position, her whole body pressed on Noah's body. Suddenly, Lindsley's beautiful body kept rubbing against Noah's body with the violent shaking of the airship, causing Noah to almost lose his self-control. Usually, he did not notice it. Only now did Noah realize that Lindsley's body was actually so good. At least, even with 2 layers of the Elven Academy uniform, Noah could clearly feel the softness of Lindsley's ample bosom and the smoothness of her thighs clamped against his body. This level of contact was enough to stir the body and mind of a healthy man. At the same time, Linley finally realized her current situation. Under her shyness, her pretty face and ears turned crimson at the same time. For a pure and innocent young lady, the impact of this kind of intimate contact should not be inferior to the accidental kiss last time, right? However, now was not the time to care about this. Dong! Another muffled crash sounded, and the entire airship shook even more violently. Ah! The young Mrs. All cried out in grief. Only Noah, who remained calm, instinctively hugged Lin Silei tightly as he steadied himself. Through the window, he saw the outside of the airship. Over there, a huge shadow was attacking the flying ship. Dong! Under the heavy crash, the airship shook violently in the sea of clouds, splashing up pieces of wood. The hull of the airship was destroyed bit by bit. In the cabin, elf users wearing military uniforms and uniforms of different countries came out of the cabin and came to the deck. Noah and the others also came out of the cabin while enduring the violent shaking. Then all of them saw it. On the side of the airship there was a huge monster. It was a monster that looked like a ray but had a single ferocious red eye on its head. Its body was half the size of the airship. Looking at the monster, Noah exclaimed in surprise. "Is that a magic beast?" "No, it's not a magic beast," Fianna said with a serious expression. "That's a military elf." Military elf? Noah froze slightly. The so-called military elf referred to a type of elf that was different from the contracted elf. The contracted elf was an existence that provided strength to the elf user through signing a contract with the elf user and fighting alongside the elf user. On the other hand, the military elf didn't need to sign a contract with the elf user to be controlled. Its advantage was that it had a wide range of uses and didn't have any requirements for the ability of the elf user. As long as one had a certain level of aptitude as a witch, one could control the military elf to a certain extent. In other words, elves that were adjusted to military elves couldn't exert their full strength. For example, military elves couldn't transform into elf devices like contracted elves, nor could they provide divine energy support to the elf user to use elf magic. At the same time, their innate strength would be limited. However, even if they were limited, such elves that could be controlled without a contract were very useful in all aspects. For example, right now, the elf user who attacked the airship didn't see any trace of him at all, but the military elf attacked the airship under the control of the elf user. Because there was no contract, anyone could control the elves, and no one knew who launched the attack. Therefore, military elves were generally used in military applications. They were most often seen in wars. Of course, the more powerful the military elf, the more elven users needed to work together to control it. For example, among the military elves, there were some elves that were very difficult to control that ordinary elven users couldn't use alone. Those elves were classified as tactical military elves. If one wanted to successfully summon tactical-level military elves, they would need to use a group of specially trained elven trainers to operate them. The power of these tactical military elves was even comparable to that of high-level elves. Their destructive power was very strong, and they were often used in wars to wipe out thousands of troops. In addition, Noah also heard that above the tactical military elves, there was a type of strategic military elves. That level of military elves was so powerful that without hundreds of elven users to perform the ritual, they absolutely couldn't be controlled. Their destructive power was peerless, and they were even sealed and not allowed to be used. If a military sprite of that level were to cause trouble, not to mention a city, even several cities could be destroyed. As for the tactical military elves, they also had the power to destroy a small city. The military elf in front of him was so energetic to deal with a mere airship, so it probably hadn't reached the tactical level, let alone the strategic level. However, to ordinary elven users, the threat of a military elf was already big enough. Why would a military elf appear in a place like this? Claire first asked this question, then immediately thought of something, and her expression also became serious. I see. You want to eliminate your opponent? The Elven Sword Dance Festival wasn't just a simple sacrificial ritual. It also symbolized the meaning of war between countries. After all, the country that obtained victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival would receive the protection of the Elven King for many years, greatly increasing the country's power. This was the reason why many countries, led by the Austrian Empire, invested so much effort in nurturing elven users and actively participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Of course, some countries would rather use unscrupulous means to obtain victory. The elven users on this airship were all participating teams from various countries. Therefore, it wasn't strange at all if a country sent out a military elf to eliminate a threat in pursuit of victory. That kind of thing doesn't matter. Alice unsheathed the knight's sword at her waist and stared closely at the ray elves outside the sea of clouds. Let's think of a way to deal with this military elf first. With that, Alice prepared to charge out. Wait! Noah immediately grabbed Alice's hand. Wah! Alice immediately cried out in surprise, her pretty face turning red as she cried out in panic. Hand! Your hand! It's just holding hands. Noah subconsciously complained. Why are you making such a fuss? What? What do you mean it's just holding hands? Alice blushed shyly and glared at Noah rather angrily. This is my first time. Noah didn't have the energy to complain. At that moment, Noah could only say, Look around. Hearing this, Alice was slightly startled and immediately looked around. Chapter 1760. Dong! The huge ray sprite slammed into the airship, causing it to shake violently. Wood shavings sputtered from the airship. The airship floating in the sea of clouds suffered a huge impact, and its altitude dropped little by little. Under such an onslaught, the elven envoys from various teams from various countries had gathered on the deck. However, they chose to stay where they were amidst a wave of whispers. They did not make a move, but instead quietly observed their surroundings. Seeing this scene, not only Alice but also Claire, Lindsley, and Viviana were stunned. Why? Lindsley asked in confusion. Why didn't anyone make a move? Undoubtedly, the airship was under attack and could fall at any time. Why didn't anyone make a move? Although the ray sprite's destructive power was shocking, it wasn't impossible to deal with. Even if it was a threat to ordinary elven messengers, each of the elven messengers here was an elite from their respective country. They shouldn't be afraid of a military sprite that wasn't even at the tactical level. Not to mention, the elven messengers here were all in a team. Even if one person couldn't take down the attacking military sprite, it shouldn't be difficult for the whole team to take it down. Under such circumstances, why didn't anyone make a move? Seeing the confused expressions of the girls, Noah explained. These people didn't make a move because they wanted to hide their strength and observe the other elven messengers of the other teams. The girls weren't idiots. Therefore, after Noah's reminder, everyone understood. If I were to make a move here, I would definitely expose some of my strength. Noah smiled indifferently when he saw the expressions of understanding on the girls' faces. That wouldn't do any good for the upcoming Elven Sword Dance Festival. So that's why no one made a move? Viviana asked in realization. On one hand, they didn't want to expose their strength. On the other hand, they were waiting for the others to make a move so that they could observe the strength of the elven messengers of the other teams and formulate countermeasures for the competition. That's right. Noah nodded. I even suspect that the purpose of the military sprite attacking this airship was not to eliminate the sprite users here and eliminate the threat. Instead, it wanted to use this opportunity to observe the strength of the sprite users here and make plans for the upcoming competition. It's possible, Claire agreed. If you want to eliminate your competitors, then sending a military sprite of this level to attack will not succeed at all. That's right. Noah smiled faintly as he looked around. Since that's the case, it's best that we don't do anything. But are we just going to watch that military elf wreak havoc? Alice frowned. If this continues, the airship will definitely fall. If it falls, then so be it. After all, the airship is the property of the House of Gods. It has nothing to do with any country. Besides, with the level of the elves here, no one will die from falling. Noah shrugged. Let's wait and see. Hearing that, the group of girls looked at each other and nodded helplessly. In fact, Noah didn't mind exposing his strength. Anyway, with the level of that ray sprite, Noah didn't even need to use the elven device. He could deal with it easily and wouldn't expose much of his strength. However, this would definitely arouse the vigilance of the teams from the other countries, causing them to target Noah specifically during the competition, or even join forces. Noah didn't want to create more trouble for himself. Besides, if that military elf was really sent by another country to observe the strength of the sprite users who attacked, wouldn't Noah's actions be in accordance with their wishes? Noah didn't have the hobby of being played like a monkey by others. Therefore, Noah chose to watch instead of jumping out to take the lead. Just as Noah expected, the other teams didn't choose to make a move. They were all in an uproar while watching from the deck. Dong! Finally, with a heavy muffled sound, the entire belly of the airship was smashed into pieces, causing the entire airship to begin to fall to the ground. This time, the sprite users on the deck couldn't remain calm. Although they were all elites of their respective countries, the sprite users who could participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival were restricted to those below the age of 20. This proved that these sprite users were all young girls. Under the threat of the airship crashing, the well-trained sprite users were still able to remain calm. However, some of the weaker sprite users started to panic. It's about to fall. Noah grabbed onto the guardrail to stabilize himself and shouted in Alice's direction. Alice! Got it! Alice was already prepared. She closed her eyes, and a phosphorescent divine energy rippled from her body. Wind, please give me strength. A gust of wind began to swirl around Noah and the rest, lifting them off the ground and floating them. At the same time, the teams from the other countries also began to use their abilities to break away from the airship. Just like that, the airship plummeted towards the ground, and finally crashed heavily into the edge of a forest. In an instant, dust and wood shavings flew everywhere. A small part of the ground was dug up by the heavy impact, and it trembled slightly. As for the elven envoys who had left the airship, they all landed safely on the ground, avoiding the fate of the airship being destroyed and their lives being lost. Just like what Noah said, the elves here wouldn't die because of the loss of the pendant. Pooh! At this moment, the ray sprite that destroyed the airship descended from mid-air and let out a hair-raising roar. With a flick of its tail, its huge body crashed downwards like a meteorite. It seemed that destroying the airship wasn't enough to make the military sprite leave. No matter what the purpose was, the target of this military sprite was the sprite users here. How could it just destroy the airship and leave? Seeing the huge ray sprite crashing down like a meteorite, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice couldn't keep calm anymore, and some divine energy began to surge from their bodies. Only Noah raised his eyebrows, and the corners of his mouth slowly rose. Finally, someone can't help but make a move? As soon as Noah finished speaking, a cold and awe-inspiring voice rang out. Holy Spirit of the pitch-black evil dragon, I hereby command thee, heed my command and destroy my enemy. The moment the stern voice sounded above the forest, a pitch-black light suddenly flashed and rushed into the air. In the pitch-black light, a huge dragon with a pitch-black luster slowly appeared. The dragon opened its ferocious mouth, and a shocking amount of divine energy gathered inside. In the next moment, the divine power transformed into a violent black flame that shot out and engulfed the entire body of the ray fish spirit that was charging over. The ray sprite didn't even have time to scream before it was incinerated in the pitch-black flames and disappeared without a trace. Seeing this scene, all the sprite users present widened their eyes. Noah looked up and gazed at the back of the pitch-black dragon. A young girl was standing there. She was a young girl with shoulder-length black hair and a rather decent appearance. The young girl wore a beret on her head, and she wore a military uniform that didn't have any wrinkles on it. It was so thin that it outlined her perfect figure. However, rather than calling it a military uniform, it looked more like a uniform from somewhere. Not only did the skirt not reach her knees, but she also wore black stockings on her legs and a pair of boots on her feet. She looked quite charming. Looking at the young girl, Noah called out her name in a low voice. The trump card of the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia, Leola Lancaster. Perhaps she heard Noah's whisper, but on the pitch-black dragon, the young girl named Leola turned her head and looked in Noah's direction. Their eyes met. At this moment, Noah and Leola only had eyes for each other. Chapter 1761. The Dragon Duchy of Doragonia. It was a large military country located on the west side of the Audiobook Empire. In terms of national power, there was still a gap between them and the Audiobook Empire. However, it was still one of the largest countries on the continent and definitely not below any other country. Moreover, the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia worshipped the dragon tribe, which was at the top of all magic beasts. They were inclined to communicate with dragon elves. Every elven envoy that could contract a dragon elf was extremely powerful. Among them, Leola Lancaster was one of the best. Not only was Leola Lancaster the trump card of the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia, she was also the leader of the Dragon Emperor Knights that represented the country at the Elven Sword Dance Festival. In the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia, Leola was revered as the daughter of the Dragon Duchy. In other words, Leola was equivalent to the princess of the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia. In the information released by the Elven Academy, she was evaluated to be at least on the same level as Versilia Eva, and Versilia was publicly recognized as the strongest person in the Elven Academy before Noah entered the academy. Moreover, at that time, Versilia had transplanted her spell inscriptions and was quite powerful. She was enough to be the trump card of the Audiobook Empire. Leola was at least on the same level as Versilia. This was enough to show how powerful this elven envoy was. In fact, it was clear from Leola's performance just now. She had the strength to defeat a military elf in one strike. She was probably one of the most powerful contestants in this elven sword dance festival. Of course, Noah and Lyanna Subble were exceptional existences. Both of them had the strength of an elven king and couldn't be counted. The other elven envoys who didn't know all this held their breaths as they watched Leola display her invincible might. Their expressions became somewhat fearful. It was clear that the Elven Sword Dance Festival would be facing an opponent of this level. Those elven envoys were starting to feel that it was truly difficult. Not only the elven envoys, but even Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice's expressions became grave. In the end, it was Claire who softly muttered, "She's very strong." The group of girls nodded one after another. At this moment, the pitch-black dragon in the sky abruptly turned its head and slowly descended. Seeing this scene, the other elven envoys instinctively dodged and retreated to the side. However, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, Alice, and the other girls started to become restless. If I'm not wrong," Linley said uneasily, "that Dukelong seems to be flying towards us, right?" "I think so." Fayanna didn't know what to do. What should we do?" "Don't panic Alice's groups. No matter what, the other party won't attack us in front of so many people. Don't worry." Alice's group was Dragon Emperor. Oh, Elven envoys of envoys. Of the Elven of the Dragon Duchy. Dragons of the Dragon of the Dragon. The moment the dragon landed, a gust of wind blew in all directions with the Dragon Duchy as the center. Clang! Immediately after, a pitch-black light blossomed from the Dragon Duchy. The Dragon Duchy turned into a beam of light and gradually turned into a large sword. Leola also landed on the ground. She stretched out her hand and caught the pitch-black sword. After hanging it on her waist, she looked up and gazed at Noah. "You're Noah Doria, right?" That one sentence stunned the group of girls. Noah didn't react strangely and met Leola's gaze. It seems that the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia has collected a lot of information on the teams of other countries. "Of course," Leola said without any pretense. "The Dragon Duchy of Doragonia's spying ability is one of the best in the entire continent. We've already obtained information on most of our opponents, let alone a large country like the Wuxia Empire. You're also the one who defeated Silent Fortress Versilia Eva. How could we not take note of you?" In fact, apart from Noah, Versilia was also defeated by Lyanna Subble. However, apart from Noah and the others, no one knew that Versilia had gone berserk in the Elven Forest after transplanting a large number of spell inscriptions. Therefore, what Leola said should be the result of Versilia's duel with Noah in the academy before transplanting a large number of spell inscriptions. Noah only shrugged. "Thank you for the compliment. I'm flattered. There's no use playing dumb here. Noah Doria, the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia has already gathered a lot of information about you. To us, you're the most important existence besides the strongest sword dancer, Lyanna Subble." Leola stared at Noah. "After all, you had a sword dance with the strongest sword dancer, but there was no victor. Isn't that right?" Lyanna Subble had appeared in the Elven Academy and had a sword dance with the only male elven envoy on the continent. In the end, there was no victor. This matter was no longer a secret to the countries with good intelligence. After all, Jen didn't hide when she first appeared in the Elven Academy. When she fought with Noah, it was also in full view of everyone. There was no way she could hide it. Of course, she couldn't hide it from a large country like the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia. However, Lyanna Subble was the idol of all elven envoys on the continent. She was known as the strongest sword dancer. Presumably, even if they knew about this, there wouldn't be many who would believe it. Leola looked for Noah because Noah had defeated Versilia. On the other hand, she definitely wanted to test the authenticity of this information. Defeated Versilia. Tied with Genisubble. If one were to talk about which one would arouse more vigilance, it would definitely be the latter. After clearly understanding this matter, Noah pretended to be surprised under Leola's gaze. Where did you get this information from? Are you still going to play dumb? Leola had been staring at Noah the whole time. When she saw Noah's surprised expression, her beautiful brows slightly furrowed and her gaze sharpened. Forget it. If you really have that kind of ability, then I'll beat you fair and square during the Elven Sword Dance Festival. No matter if you're the strongest sword dancer or male elven envoys, if you want to defeat me and my Nidhogg, then come and try. After saying this, Leola slightly raised the pitch-black greatsword hanging at her waist. A faintly discernible pressure emanated from the pitch-black greatsword, before disappearing in an instant. However, Noah and the others still felt it. Nidhogg. Alice stared at the pitch-black greatsword at Leola's waist and muttered, "That's the strongest dragon elf in the Dragon Emperor Knights?" "That's right. My Nidhogg is the strongest dragon elf in the Dragon Emperor Knights." Leola glanced at Alice. "You're Versilia Eva's foster sister, right? I'll show you who's stronger in the Elven Sword Dance Festival between my Nidhogg and your foster sister's Citadel elf." After saying that, Leola turned around and headed back to her party without any hesitation. Only then did the group of young girls relax. "What a terrifying pressure," Fayanna said with a lingering fear. "Do we really have to face someone like that at the Elven Sword Dance Festival?" Claire, Linley, and Alice also looked uneasy. Seeing the four girls' reactions, Noah didn't say much. It was good to be able to recognize the threat of an opponent. At least, to these four girls, Leola was an unimaginable enemy. Perhaps even if the four of them joined forces, they might not be able to defeat Leola. Leola Lancaster. Noah smiled. Interesting. Chapter 1762. In the end, although the attacking military elves were cleanly dealt with by Leola, the flying ship suffered severe damage and was unable to continue taking off. Without any other choice, the person in charge of the ship could only request assistance from the gods' parliament and have them send another flying ship over. While waiting for the arrival of the flying ship, the elven messengers could only continue to stay where they were and rest. During this time, just like how Leola found Noah and probed him to a certain extent, the teams of the other countries also took the opportunity to interact with the teams of the other countries. They feigned civility and attempted to obtain as much information as possible that would be beneficial to them. However, there were two teams that didn't send anyone to probe. One was naturally the Dragon Emperor Knights that Leola had previously displayed her invincible prowess. Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice weren't the only ones who were extremely fearful of Leola's strength. The rest of the elves were also extremely fearful of Leola, and didn't dare to rashly approach and inquire about her strength. The other team was the fairy tale that Noah was in. If it was said that the reason why the teams from the other countries did not test the Dragon Emperor Knights was because they were afraid of Leola, then the reason why they did not test the fairy tale was because they were afraid of her. That's right, afraid. No matter which country the elven messengers were from, they were all afraid of approaching the fairy tale. There was no other reason other than the existence of the male elven messenger Noah in the fairy tale. Like Claire, Linsley, Fayanna, and Alice as pure witches who could communicate with elves, all the elven messengers here were rather pure. It was truly too difficult for them to approach a male that they normally wouldn't have the opportunity to interact with. Therefore, even though many people were curious as to why Leola would find Noah, none of them chose to probe and instead stayed far away. Of course, there would definitely be a lot of private discussions about it. That's a male elven messenger like Demon King Solomon over there? He doesn't seem very scary. Don't be fooled by his appearance. That's a male elven messenger. An existence like Demon King Solomon. Yeah. If I approach it rashly, I might be tainted. Maybe I'll be eaten. She might even get pregnant. Are you serious? Of course it's true. Didn't you see that the Demon King already has 4 innocent girls who have been captured? How pitiful. Evil Demon King. We must defeat him at the Elven Sword Dance Festival. That's right. If I let him win, I don't know if he will make an outrageous wish. For example, for us to hold hands with him or something like that. Wah! That's too much. Similar discussions like this kept coming from all around, and Noah really had the urge to find a hole to hide in. especially the part about making an outrageous wish, but in the end it was to hold hands. Noah had the urge to complain. These girls were so pure and innocent. Did their families know about it? Noah was starting to worry about how these girls were going to get married after they retired. Could it be that there were still people who thought that they could get pregnant just by kissing? With that thought, Noah began to size up the surrounding elven envoys. Quick! Look! That demon king is looking at us. It's true. Don't look at him. You'll get pregnant if you look at him. Wah! Suddenly there was a commotion around them. Noah finally understood. He really underestimated the purity of these girls by thinking that they could get pregnant just by kissing. Wasn't this? They were starting to think that they could get pregnant just by looking at Noah. What a trap! Just as Noah felt that it was getting more and more difficult to bear, finally, a new flying ship came from the other side of the sky and slowly landed in front of everyone. Only then did everyone enter the new flying ship in an orderly manner. Under the flying ship's transport, they once again flew in the direction of the Holy Realm. Ragnar Isa. That was the Holy Realm that belonged to the Wind Elf King's territory. The main body of the Holy Realm was an island. It was a huge floating island surrounded by steep mountain ranges, suspended between thick clouds. Looking from afar, that huge floating island looked like a fairy island. It was very beautiful. Riding the flying ship, the elven envoys who were participating in the Elven Sword Dance Festival arrived at the floating island and disembarked at the port. After arriving at the port, the elven envoys would change into teams and take the carriages prepared by the deity ceremonial institution to a tower located in the center of the island. That tower was an ancient relic that could be traced back to the era of the Elven War. During the Elven Sword Dance Festival, that tower was where the participants would stay. While still in the carriage, Noah saw that tower. That tower stood on a small hill. Its appearance was very beautiful, but it didn't lose its dignity. It was surrounded by a lush forest and there was a lake not far away. The environment was very beautiful. After passing through the city gate and entering the tower, the first thing that could be seen was a vast entrance hall. The hall was designed with a high ceiling, and the ceiling was decorated with beautiful arches. Behind the arches was a long corridor of stone pillars covered with carpets. The lighting devices were not lamps, nor were they elven oars. Instead, they were light elves that floated in the air like fireflies. At first, Noah thought that as a relic from thousands of years ago, this place would look very ancient. However, after entering, Noah discovered that although this was a relic, it had been modified many times over the past thousands of years. He could hardly see the original appearance of the relic. However, there were still some ancient carvings on the walls and pillars. As for the walls of the long corridor of stone pillars, there were many colorful paintings hanging on them. Those paintings depicted the elven concubines who directly served the Elven King, as well as the victors of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Among them there was Gray, who had won 24 years ago, and Lillian Asubble, who had won 3 years ago. As Noah looked around these historical sites, he was led to a room by which G of the Gods Parliament. The teams that were preparing to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival would all be given a room. However, because Noah was a male elven envoy, the Gods Parliament naturally wouldn't let Noah stay with a bunch of innocent young ladies. Of course, Noah was only one person, so he couldn't get a room of the same size as the rest of the teams. Instead, he was assigned to a small room that was more remote. After that, which G of the Gods Parliament, who was leading the way for Noah, seemed to be really afraid of being sullied by Noah, and hurriedly ran away. Noah could only watch her leave speechlessly as he sat on the bed. Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice should be in the room unpacking their luggage. Because Noah had put all the necessities into the gift card, he didn't bring any extra luggage. Naturally, he didn't need to spend any effort to unpack. Thus, Noah took advantage of this time to continue looking through the information given by the Alicia Elven Academy. According to the information, there were a total of 24 teams participating in the Elven Sword Dance Festival this time. It's much less than I expected. The Elven Sword Dance Festival wasn't something that could be participated in just because one wanted to. Basically, according to the Gods Parliament's allocation, every country could only have one participant. Only a few large countries with many outstanding elven envoys could have more than one participant. For example, the Alphys Empire only had one participant. The Kurna Empire, located in the east, had 2 participants. Apart from the Alicia Empire, there was only one other country that had 3 participants, Holy Georgia. As for the Draco Duchy of Dalagunia, they had 2 participants. I just don't know what kind of people are in the Purgatory Apostles. As soon as he said this, a sweet laughter suddenly sounded from Noah's room. At least, I can tell you that there's someone as scary as Lotus in there. Chapter 1763. Almost at the same time that sweet laughter rang out, several pitch-black feathers fluttered down from the sky and slowly landed on the ground. Noah, who had sunk into deep thought, was slightly startled. He immediately raised his head and looked in the direction of the window. There, a young girl was sitting on the windowsill. She was wearing a dark robe that seemed to represent inauspiciousness, exuding a profound aura. His long black and straight hair that reached his waist hung down softly, slightly moving up and down as the wind blew. The young girl opened her eyes that were as dark as dusk and looked straight at Noah. Her delicate face was like the most perfect piece of art, and she had an equally perfect smile. That scene was simply as beautiful as a painting, and it was enough to make anyone lose their mind. Although Noah did not lose his mind, his attention was completely attracted by the young girl. Looking at the graceful and beautiful young girl sitting on the windowsill, Noah muttered in a low voice, "Lestia." This young girl was the contract fairy of the Demon King, the highest dark elf Lestia. Although she was an elf, Lestia's temperament was extremely elegant and beautiful. There was no difference between her and a human's. And such a young girl at this very moment appeared in Noah's room without any ill feelings. She looked straight at Noah with eyes that were as mysterious as dusk, and her beautiful face outlined a mesmerizing smile. "You really came here after all. I know you don't want to see me here." Noah glanced at Lestia. "After all, you don't want to see me take away the world fragment from Lotus and cause the Dark Elf King's power to go out of control, right?" "That's right." Lestia nodded without beating around the bush. "Although Lotus has always said that the thing in her body doesn't belong to her, but to you, if she loses it, the power of the Dark Elf King in her body will go berserk, making Lotus become like King Solomon, swallowed by the power of the Dark Elf King and turned into a lump of pure resentment. I will absolutely not watch Lotus become like that. So, you're not here to persuade me not to participate in the Elven Sword Dance, are you?" Noah pursed his lips. "Don't you think it's a little unrealistic to talk about this now? Of course I know. Since you're here, you'll definitely take away the thing in Lotus's body." Lestia's beautiful eyes rippled like the surface of a lake. "Of course I know that. It's useless to say anything now." After saying this, Lestia gently jumped down from the window. Her toes touched the ground as if she was dancing. With a light leap, she arrived in front of Noah. Then, under Noah's gaze, Lestia's delicate face still carried a perfect smile as her delicate body slowly bent down. Because Noah was sitting on the edge of the bed, when Lestia bent down, her beautiful face was immediately pulled closer to Noah's face. Her beautiful face was tightly locked with Noah's eyes, causing a burst of fragrance to waft into Noah's nose. At such a close distance, if an outsider saw this, they would definitely think that Noah and Lestia were a pair of lovers. At this moment, if someone were to barge in, they would definitely think that Noah and Lestia were about to kiss. That scene could only be described as ambiguous. However, if one thought about it carefully, in reality Noah and Lestia's relationship was not good, let alone good. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was bad. The proof was Lestia's next sentence. "Have you never thought that I'm here to kill you?" Undoubtedly, the content of her words was very creepy. However, Lestia's words were very suggestive, as if she was confessing to her sweetheart. If it was a less resolute man at this moment, perhaps even the words, "if it was you, it wouldn't matter even if you killed me," would have slipped out of his mouth in a delirious manner, right? Unfortunately, Noah was not that type of man. Although Lestia was indeed very beautiful and very elegant, it was not enough to make Noah fall for her. "If you can kill me, then you can try it here." Noah smiled indifferently. "Of course, if you fail, I don't think I need to tell you the consequences, right?" Hee. Lestia let out an enchanting laugh. Her eyes, which were rippling like the surface of a lake, gradually regained their calm. "How scary." After saying that, Lestia wanted to straighten up. However, at this moment, Noah suddenly reached out his hand and hugged Lestia's slender waist, pulling her into his embrace. Lestia did not expect Noah to suddenly do this. She did not even have time to react before she was pulled into Noah's embrace. Her delicate body was tightly pressed against Noah's body. This position was even more ambiguous than before. At first glance, it was obvious that they were lovers intending to be intimate. Lestia was caught off guard and could not help but be stunned. Then a hint of anger appeared in her eyes. No matter how much she looked like a human girl, Lestia was still an elf. Noah's current actions were already considered disrespectful to elves. Not to mention that Lestia wasn't an ownerless sprite, but a contracted sprite with a master. As a contracted elf, regardless of the level of the contracted elf, she would not casually get close to another elf. For example, apart from Noah, Aster and Athena did not express any intimacy with anyone else. As the highest-ranking dark elf, Lestia could not help but have this tendency. However, before Lestia could make things difficult for him, Noah held Lestia's waist with one hand and pinched her chin with the other. He raised Lestia's face to look at him. Then, Noah stared into Lestia's eyes and said, "You're right. You just said that there is a person as terrifying as Lotus in the Purgatory Apostles. What is that about?" This sentence calmed the anger in Lestia's heart. At this moment, Lestia no longer cared about Noah's ambiguous actions. She looked at Noah with a mischievous smile. "Do you care that much? I would be lying if I said I don't care." Noah stared intently at Lestia's dust-colored eyes as if he was trying to see through Lestia's heart. Logically speaking, there should be no one in this world that can reach the level of Lotus and I. Besides the Elf King, there should be no one else. "That's where you're wrong," Lestia corrected him, pretending to be kind. "That contracted Miss Holy Sword. In terms of strength, even the Elf King has to be wary of her. Isn't that an example?" Noah immediately fell silent. In the elemental elf world, there might not be any elves as powerful as Miss Holy Sword. However, there are still existences that are second only to the Elf King. Lestia said. They are existences that are above the demon god elves and are known as mythical elves. Mythical elves. Noah's heart skipped a beat. Mythical elves. Noah had seen this term in the ancient books in the Academy Library. Just as Lestia said, they were existences that were above the demon god elves and second only to the Elf King. According to the records, elves of this level only lived in the elemental elf world and never entered the human world. At least, in the records from ancient times, there was only one mythical elven that appeared in the human world. It was a dragon elven. Moreover, it was the most powerful dragon elven. That dragon elven lived in the Dragon Duchy of Duragonia. As an elf, it ruled the entire Dragon Duchy of Duragonia, and was worshipped as a king by the people of that country. People called it the Dragon King. Thinking of this, Noah said sarcastically, "You are not going to tell me that in the Purgatory Apostles someone has contracted a mythical elven, right? Do you want to know?" Lestia smiled sweetly. "You will find out sooner or later." As soon as she finished speaking, Lestia, who was sitting in Noah's arms, suddenly turned into a black feather and floated to the ground. She disappeared. Noah remained silent as a thoughtful expression appeared in his eyes. Chapter 1764. At this very moment, a young girl was standing at the top of a city tower on a hill, facing the wind. The young girl was wearing an exotic costume that looked like a witch's costume. Her beautiful black hair that reached her waist swayed in the wind. Together with her loose-fitting clothes, they fluttered in the wind and fluttered in the wind. The young girl stood against the wind and looked into the distance as if she could see something. She stood there quietly like a statue. Under such circumstances, it didn't take long for another girl to appear there. It was a young girl wearing a green military uniform. Like the previous girl, she had long black hair that reached her waist. However, unlike the previous girl's aloof temperament, the young girl in the military uniform carried a sharp aura that was as cold as a blade. She wore a mask with a picture of a ghost on it. It looked quite frightening. The moment the young girl in the military uniform arrived, she immediately said with a cold voice, "It's not easy to find you, the strongest sword dancer." Hearing this, Lotus did not even turn her head. She continued to look into the distance as if she already knew who was coming. She said this in an ethereal tone. "Why are you looking for me? Lu, It's best not to say that name here. The young girl in the military uniform suddenly interrupted Lotus without any hesitation. The aura on her body also became somewhat scorching. That name is taboo here. If you don't want to get into trouble, it's best not to say it. Is that so? Lotus said without any change in expression. Then what should I call you? Call me Red Lotus. The young girl in the military uniform who called herself Red Lotus said coldly. At least you can call me that here. Understood. Lotus said almost without any hesitation. Then, Red Lotus, why are you looking for me? Your dark elf seems to have gone to find that man. Red Lotus did not beat around the bush and said directly. Don't you plan to control her? There's no need for that. Lotus answered very straightforwardly. Lestia is free to go wherever she wants. I have no right to control her and I won't. Is that so? Red Lotus said indifferently. But I remember that the dark elf seems to want to kill that man for you. If you let her go to that man, aren't you afraid that she will secretly help you solve everything? It's fine. Lotus said. If it's only Lestia, she won't be able to kill Noah. You sure have a lot of confidence in that Noah Dole. I hope he's really as useful as you say. Don't let me down. Red Lotus turned her head away in a non-committal manner, then changed the topic of the conversation. Besides, even if that dark elf didn't find Noah Dole, your sister would have gone to find him, right? Hearing this, Lien's brows finally furrowed. Maoya also went to find him? Not only did he look for him, he even attacked him, Hong Lien replied mechanically. According to Lily's report, Moya Alianstalu took out the military elves sealed in the magical equipment and used them to attack the flying ship of the Alicia Elven Academy. If Noah was here and heard Red Lotus's description, he would definitely be shocked, right? Because, according to Red Lotus, the military sprite that attacked the flying ship during the day was controlled by Lotus' sister. Although that Ray sprite hadn't reached the level of a tactical military sprite, it wasn't something that a single sprite user could command, right? With the power of that Ray fish sprite, there should be at least a few sprite users controlling it for it to be able to be successfully commanded. Based on Red Lotus' words, Lotus' younger sister seemed to be able to command such a military sprite by herself. If that was the case, then the girl named Maoya either had outstanding abilities as an elf user, comparable to Leola and Versilia, or was trained as an elf user who specialized in commanding military elves. And now, such an existence had her eyes on Noah. If Noah knew about this, he would definitely laugh bitterly at how popular he was. Of course, what was even more shocking was that Lotus actually had a younger sister. That Lotus Asubble actually had a younger sister? That was simply unheard of. Only Lien knew how much of a headache her younger sister could cause. Undoubtedly, she promised me that she wouldn't attack Noah, Lotus said helplessly. In the end, Maoya really went back on her word? For Moya Alianstalu, even if the world was destroyed, it wouldn't have anything to do with her. Only you, her elder sister, are something that she remembers more than anyone else. Hong Lien's voice was emotionless as she described it simply. And you care so much about Noah Duro. There's no way that monster wouldn't be jealous. That's enough reason for her to take action. Lotus fell silent. This was because Hong Lien's words were irrefutable. Although it sounded unbelievable, Moya Alianstalu was such a person. She admired Lotus morbidly. She longed for Lotus morbidly. She adored Lotus morbidly. This was Moya Alianstalu, a young girl who gave Lotus a headache. Forget it. Lotus sighed. In any case, even Moya probably can't do anything to Noah, right? Unfortunately, the one who dealt with the military elf controlled by Moya Alianstalu wasn't Noah Doria, but the princess of Chi Dragon. Hong Lien cast her gaze on Lotus. I haven't seen his strength yet, so I'll maintain a wait-and-see attitude for now. If he's really as mysterious and powerful as you say, then that's great. My plan should be of use to him, Hong Lien said coldly. If that's just your one-sided opinion, although it's a pity to lose a useful chess piece, since you're on my side, I have nothing to lose. With that, Hong Lien turned her back to Lotus. Just as she was about to leave, she seemed to have thought of something and said this. There will be a ceremony tonight in the form of a ball. Do you want to participate? A ball? Lotus pondered for a moment, then shook her head. No need. If you want to participate, you can go with Lily. Oh. Hong Lien was surprised. I thought you would go and meet him. I've already told him everything that I should have told him, Lotus said in a tone that was filled with a strong will. Next, I just need to communicate with my sword. That's enough. Up to you. Hong Lian was silent for a moment, then said, if that's the case, I won't participate. Let me see how valuable Noah Doria is at the Elven Sword Dance Festival. After saying this, Hong Lian didn't stay any longer and left. Only Lotus continued to stand against the wind. She held her heart with one hand as she softly muttered, has this moment finally arrived? The sky began to darken as Lillian Ashubal muttered, night fell here. Under the gradually darkening night sky, the city tower located on the hill was still brightly lit. It was quite bright. Of course, it wasn't the light from the lamps, but the light released by the light fairies. Therefore, even in the courtyard, there were still light particles floating in the air like fireflies, illuminating the entire space. Under such circumstances in the darkness, a petite girl in a black robe slowly appeared and stepped into the courtyard. The moment the petite figure appeared, the small light fairies in the surroundings seemed to have seen something terrifying. They all flew away in fright, causing the entire courtyard to become incomparably dark in an instant. In the next second, the girl lifted the hood of her black robe, exposing her face to the air. It was a girl who looked to be about 12 or 13 years old. She had a head of long dark gray hair tied into two ponytails that drooped on both sides of her head. The girl raised her head and looked into the building in front of her. A ferocious light flashed in her eyes. I won't let anyone take my sister away. I won't. A mark flashed on the back of one of the girl's hands. Chapter 1765. At the same time when the sky started to darken, Noah, who estimated that Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice should have finished packing their luggage, walked out of his room and headed towards the girls' room. The opening ceremony of the Elven Sword Dance Festival would be held tonight. Therefore, not only the elven messengers who came to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, but even the royal family of the various countries would come to the dance venue to observe. However, they didn't have to attend this dance. Apart from the royal family of the various countries, the elven messengers who were preparing to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival were free to choose whether to attend or not. There were no restrictions. Noah didn't want to attend. As the only male elven messenger, if Noah appeared at the dance venue, who knew what kind of strange gazes he would attract from the royal family of the nobles? To those pure elven messengers, Noah only needed to have the factor of being a male to be looked at in a different light. Moreover, Wuxia of the gods' parliament valued purity even more than the elven messengers. Basically, she was in an environment where the opposite sex was completely isolated. Wouldn't she look at Noah in a different light? After so many lessons this time, Noah didn't want to be looked at like a monkey in a public place and be pointed at by others. Therefore, Noah wouldn't attend the dance. As for whether the girls in the team would attend, Noah didn't know. Therefore, Noah felt that he had to ask for the opinions of the team members first. Ugh! Just as Noah passed by the courtyard, a slight strange sound entered Noah's ears. Immediately, Noah stopped in his tracks. Because that sound, no matter how he heard it, sounded like a painful groan that had been deliberately suppressed. At that moment, Noah turned his head and looked in the direction of the voice. He slowly approached the source of the voice. Not long after, Noah saw it. In a dark corner of the courtyard, a girl was supporting herself against the wall with one hand and covering her heart with the other, letting out that suppressed groan. Noah could clearly see that the girl was wearing a beret on her head. The beret was embroidered with the emblem of a flying dragon. A dragon emblem? Noah said in surprise. Raviola Lancaster? Hearing someone calling her, Leola's slender shoulders trembled slightly, then she slowly turned her head. At this moment, Noah's eyes suddenly narrowed. The eyes of Leola, who had turned around, were incomparably scarlet red. It was as if they were filled with blood. Rather than calling those eyes the eyes of a human, it would be better to call them the eyes of a beast. At the very least, Noah did not see the rationality unique to humans. Instead, there was a great deal of arrogance. Being stared at by such a pair of eyes in the dark, anyone would feel their scalp tingling. Although Noah did not become like this, he still frowned. What's wrong with you? It's you? Leola clutched her chest and also frowned. Why are you here? You're the one who asked me first. Noah pursed his lips. I just happened to pass by. Is that so? Leola stared at Noah with her scarlet eyes and spoke in a cold voice. If that's the case, you better stay away from me. Otherwise, I might attack you later. Looking at you now, you do look like you will attack anyone at any time. Noah shrugged, but he didn't leave as Leola said. Instead, he continued to ask. What's going on? What? Leola said sarcastically. This time it's your turn to test me and get information from me? You can think of it that way, Noah said indifferently. Of course, you can also choose not to tell me. Forget it. It's not something that needs to be hidden. Anyway, a lot of people know about this matter. Leola tightened his grip on his chest and said, If you're expecting something to happen to my body, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. The dragon blood in my body is slightly active. Dragon blood. Noah was startled at first, but he soon recalled. The so-called dragon blood referred to a special physique that appeared in the witches of the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia. It was said that there was a type of witches in the Dragon Duchy who specialized in serving the wyverns. The dragon blood was a very rare unique physique that would only appear in witch concubines like her. It was said that when the dragon blood in the witches with this special physique awakened, they would completely assimilate with the wyverns. In other words, when the dragon blood awakened, the witches with this special physique would be physically and mentally close to the wyverns. In the end, they would possess physical strength and instincts comparable to the wyverns, greatly increasing their combat strength. The side effect was that the witches with the dragon blood would be like a berserk wyvern without much rationality. Therefore, it was a double-edged sword. I didn't expect you to possess the dragon blood as well. Noah looked at Leola's scarlet eyes. It seems like you're much stronger than I thought. There's nothing to be surprised about. The awakening of the dragon blood isn't just about benefits. I know that. Leola stared at Noah closely. Because there are too many capable elf users here. The warlike part of me stimulated the dragon blood to become active. If you don't want to fight me here, you'd better leave quickly. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that I won't attack you later. After all, in Leola's heart, Noah was a stronger opponent than Versilia. If Noah continued to stay here, Leola, who longed to fight Noah, might completely awaken the dragon blood in her body. That might be the case. When that happened, Noah would have to bear the brunt of the battle with Leola. I don't want to do that kind of troublesome thing. Noah surrendered right away. It's better for me not to be a busybody here. Bye. After that, Noah turned around and tried to leave. However, at that moment, Leola suddenly extended her hand and grabbed Noah's arm. Now that you mention it, I feel like fighting you instead. Leola stared at Noah and her eyes glowed with a scarlet radiance. Just treat it as an afterthought before the battle. Keep me company for a while. Leola's adorable face curled into a battle-thirsty smile as she said this. On the other hand, Leola extended her other hand to her waist and placed it on the pitch-black greatsword. Some phosphorescent divine might surged from Leola's body. It was apparent that Leola wasn't joking. Looking at the scarlet radiance in Leola's eyes getting denser, Noah knitted his brows tightly. At the next second, a tender voice sounded from the side. Big sister over there, I advise you not to attack that big brother over there. He's Maoya's prey. As soon as the voice sounded, swish, a long whip made of clear water fell from the sky and swept across the space. Amidst a chilling sound, it smashed toward Noah and Leola's direction. Noah and Leola froze for a moment. Then they stomped their feet on the ground and retreated rapidly. Smack! Amidst a crisp sound, the long whip made of water struck the ground heavily and smashed a few stone bricks in the courtyard. The shards shot out in all directions. Even the stone bricks were smashed easily. If the long whip of water were to land on a human, perhaps it wouldn't just leave a few scars. After dodging the attack, Noah and Leola lifted their heads and looked in the direction where the long whip of water came from. Over there was a water ball that was a size larger than a human floating in midair. The outline of the water ball had countless water streams dancing around it. It looked like a long whip but more like a tentacle. Beside the water ball stood a petite young lady in a black robe. Leola stared at the young lady coldly with scarlet eyes. Who are you? However, this sentence made the young lady cast a pressuring gaze at Leola. The person I'm looking for isn't you. You're a hindrance. Big sister, hurry up and disappear. In an instant, the tentacle-like water stream swept across like a long whip and lashed toward Leola's direction. Chapter 1766. The water whip cut through the air with an extremely sharp sound. With a powerful force, it fiercely smashed in Leola's direction. Judging from the swift and fierce wind, it was apparent that this attack wasn't merciful at all. Noah narrowed his eyes slowly. Even though he didn't know who the young lady who called herself Maoya was, he knew that her target seemed to be him. The evidence was that the young lady named Maoya had been staring at Noah from the very beginning and didn't take in Leola at all. Maoya was clearly treating Leola like she was nothing, but she actually launched a merciless attack on Leola without saying a single word. No one dared to believe that this young lady, who appeared to be only 12 or 13 years old, was actually this cruel. But it was a pity that Maoya was too arrogant and belittled Leola. Slash. Accompanied by the sound of slashing, the pitch-black sword flashed like a flash of light, directly cutting through the oncoming whip of water. I see. Leola's eyes were as red as flames and she pointed the pitch-black sword at Maoya from afar. Do you want to replace that male elf and fight with me? It seemed like Maoya's attack had awakened the dragon blood that Leola had been suppressing. On the other hand, Maoya finally shifted her gaze to Leola and exclaimed in surprise. You actually used your sword to sever the tentacle of Skylar, which doesn't have a physical body. Big sister, you're pretty capable. Skylar? Noah was struck by a thought and looked at the water ball hovering beside Maoya in astonishment. Is that Skylar? Skylar. It was a type of military elf used for special missions. Due to the fact that military sprites were usually extremely destructive, almost every single one of them required at least several sprite users to control them. Tactical and strategic military sprites required even more manpower to be used. However, Skylar was a more special type of military elf. Its destructive power wasn't considered great. Therefore, the elf users could control it by themselves. However, it was rather difficult to deal with. If he performed well, Skylar would be able to fight against the High Elves. He would be able to compete with the 12 Knights of the Kingdom of Audiobook, because its combat power was not bad, and the conditions for summoning it were quite simple. This kind of military sprite was generally easy to abuse. Therefore, after the last war, Skylar was considered too dangerous and was sealed and abandoned by the various countries. Now this kind of sealed and abandoned military sprite had appeared here, which was why Noah was a little surprised. Even Leola was slightly startled. Then she stared at Skylar, who was floating beside Maoya with a burning gaze. I didn't expect that the abandoned military elves that were judged to be too dangerous would appear here. Let's hope that your Skylar can calm my surging blood. What's wrong? Big sister? Do you want to fight Maoya? Maoya won't be merciful, you know? Maoya said those cruel words with an innocent expression and tone. Maoya's target isn't you. If you intend to obstruct Maoya, Maoya will use Skylar's tentacles to tear your body into pieces. You want to kill me by using an abandoned military elf. Leola's eyes flashed with a scarlet luster. Then let's see who's stronger between my Nidhogg and Skylar. After saying that, Leola threw the pitch-black greatsword in her hand into the air and chanted an incantation in the elven language with a stern voice. Dark evil dragon soul, shatter the endless light. The pitch-black greatsword that was thrown into the air suddenly released a blinding light. In that blinding light, the pitch-black greatsword gradually melted and turned into a pitch-black dragon. Roar! It was the most powerful dragon elf in the Dragon Emperor Knight Legion, of the Dragon Dukedom of Dragon Dukedom, Nidhogg. The pitch-black dragon let out a roar that shook the air. It opened its ferocious dragon mouth and gathered pitch-black godly power. At this moment, even the surrounding air seemed to have been stirred up, suddenly becoming turbid. Maoya widened her eyes slightly and said in a low voice, "Not good. I underestimated that big sister's strength." However, before Maoya had time to react, pitch-black scorching flames poured down from the sky like a flash of light. Boom! The pitch-black flames that descended from the sky landed on Skylar's body and exploded, setting off strong gusts of wind that crushed the stone bricks on the ground into rubble and shot out in all directions like bullets. The explosion peeled off the sand and exposed the surface of the ground. The surrounding flowers, plants, and trees collapsed one after another as if they were hit by a typhoon. That destructive power was simply ridiculously strong. It was enough to compare to a tactical military sprite. Therefore, in the gusts of wind, the girl named Maoya let out a sorrowful cry. She was blown away and rolled on the ground in a sorry state. Noah, on the other hand, had retreated the moment Nidhogg was summoned. He steadily avoided the oncoming storm, appearing to be so calm and collected. On the other hand, Leola looked at Skylar that was turned into ashes by Nidhogg's breath. She frowned deeply and sighed in disappointment. After all, it's only a military elf used for special missions. Even if it's judged to be dangerous, it still can't compare to a tactical military elf. In order to fight with Leola's Nidhogg, it had to be at least a tactical military elf. That was what Leola was implying. Maoya got up from the ground in a sorry state. She looked at Skylar that had disappeared and then at the disappointed Leola. Her eyes lost all luster like that of a doll. "I'll kill you." In an instant, a terrifying feeling that made one's heart shrink spread from Maoya's petite body. Clank! On the back of one of Maoya's hands, an imprint bloomed with radiance. Oh! Leola's interest was reignited. "Are you ready to summon a contract elf?" Unlike Leola, who was gradually controlled by her battle instincts due to the awakening of her dragon blood, Noah looked at the imprint on the back of Maoya's hand and narrowed his eyes. "No, that's not an elf imprint. That's a spell imprint." Spell imprint. It was an elf imprint that could be artificially transplanted into an elf user's body. It could add different attributes and various effects to the elf, and even forcefully draw out the elf's power. However, it would reduce the user's life force and cause a mental breakdown. In the past, Versilia had transplanted it. Gray and Vaz had also imprinted a spell imprint on their hearts, but they both lost their elf user abilities due to the backlash. That girl actually had such a dangerous item? Not only that, but Maoya also raised one hand. That hand was wearing a ring. From that ring, Noah felt a rather powerful divine power. Therefore, Noah could be sure. That was a magic equipment. Moreover, it was a magic equipment that sealed an elf. Another military elf? After all, it seemed that Maoya wanted to use the elf sealed in the magic equipment to fight. However, an elf without a contract couldn't be used in battle at all. Unless it was a military elf. That little girl, where did she get so many military elves from? Just as Noah's expression became a little serious, Maoya's eyes suddenly trembled, and her expression became uncertain. Then Maoya glared at Leola. "I'll let you go today. Next time, Maoya will definitely kill you." After saying that, Maoya looked at Noah. "Big brother, you're the same. Maoya won't let anyone who pesters my sister go." After leaving this sentence, Maoya moved like a rabbit and suddenly got into the grass at the side. Seeing this, Noah almost subconsciously wanted to chase after her. But then his footsteps slowed down and he suddenly retreated. Almost at the same time, a scorching breath fell from the sky. Boom! Amidst the explosion, the scorching breath hit the ground, setting off a violent storm and flames. In the storm and flames, Leola slowly walked out. Her incomparably red eyes stared straight at Noah. Noah's face sank. Chapter 1767. Roar. In midair, the pitch-black dragon let out a roar that shook the air. Immediately after, its entire body was covered by a burst of light. Its body gradually turned into light particles and converged in Leola's direction below. Leola raised her hand high up and let the light particles that fell from the sky flow into her hand little by little like a stream of water. In the next second, the light particles that converged in Leola's hand condensed into a pitch-black greatsword that Leola held tightly. "This is my elven device, Dragon Slayer." Leola directly cast her gaze on Noah, her scarlet eyes flashing. "Male elven user, take out your elven device. It seems that the dragon blood in your body has awakened." Noah frowned deeply. "If you want to fight, can't you just chase after that elven user just now? I'm not interested in a guy who only knows how to run away." Moreover, that elven user's military elven user was simply too weak. "Although I don't know if she's still hiding any trump cards, compared to her, I'm more interested in you." Leola's voice faintly revealed a hint of fanaticism. "Didn't they say that you can compete with that strongest sword dancer? Let me see what you're capable of." After saying that, Leola suddenly leaped like an arrow that had been released from a bow. With a faint sound of breaking through the air, she violently rushed in front of Noah. "Come, Come and satisfy the dragon in my body." As the scorching words were spoken, Leola raised the pitch-black greatsword in her hand high up. Without any fancy moves, she viciously slashed down at Noah in front of her. This slash stirred up a powerful force that caused the air to become chaotic, causing a sharp sword hum to resound in the air. Without any hesitation, Noah sidestepped. With a turn of his feet, he immediately dodged to the side like a ghost. Swoosh! The slash that carried a powerful force swept past Noah's original position and brushed past Noah's body before landing heavily in the air. However, the force that it carried was like a sharp knife that scraped Noah's skin. The strong wind that caused Noah to feel a slight tingling sensation on his skin made him understand one thing in an instant. This guy actually completely materialized the elven device? In the elemental world of the elemental spirits, elven users could use contracted elves as pure divine power. In this way, the body possessed by divine power was almost equivalent to the elves themselves. Even if they were directly hit by the elven device and elven magic, they wouldn't suffer any real damage and would only cause mental damage. Back then, the elven user would choose to enter the elemental world of the elemental world of the world of the elemental world because of this reason. Needless to say, a sacrificial ceremony like the Elven Sword Dance Festival definitely prohibited intentional harm. Therefore, the elemental world of the elemental world of the elemental world of the world of the elemental world of the world of the elemental spirits. In this way, elven users only needed to reduce the degree of materialization of the elven device and they could directly damage the elemental world of the world of the elemental world of the world of the elemental world of the world of the elemental world. However, Leola directly materialized the elven device. If Noah didn't dodge that attack just now, wouldn't he have been split into two? Leola was simply trying to kill Noah. If she did so, no matter how good her reason was, once the gods' parliament knew about it, her qualifications to participate in the Elemental Sword Dance Festival would definitely be revoked. Unfortunately, Leola's eyes were already glowing red. It was obvious that this Dragon Duke had completely lost her mind. Under such circumstances, it was useless to say anything to Leola. They say that women are unreasonable. This principle is really vividly demonstrated by you elven users. Because as a male, Noah was viewed differently in this world of elven users where there were only females. Noah could still understand this point. Who asked those elven users to be pure and innocent young girls who had never come into contact with the opposite sex before? However, understanding was one thing, it didn't mean that Noah could be casually picked on. Noah tolerated the elven user who claimed to be Mauya who came out of nowhere and declared that she wanted to kill him. After all, Noah could be considered to have caused a lot of influence in this world. It wasn't strange that someone wanted to kill him. Not to mention this world, no matter which world it was, there would always be people who schemed to kill Noah. There was no need to find it strange at all. However, that didn't mean that Noah didn't have a temper. Those who killed would be killed by others. Since others wanted to kill Noah, then even if they were killed by Noah, they couldn't blame anyone. As for Leola, a Duke Long who had lost her rationality, Noah didn't want to be entangled with her at all. Therefore, almost at the instant when Leola's sword fell, Noah suddenly raised his hand and slapped heavily on Leola's sword. Smack! Along with a crisp sound, the elven device in Leola's hand was sent flying by Noah's slap. WH? Leola couldn't help but change her expression. At this moment, a voice sounded in Leola's ears. Although your strength has increased greatly after the enhancement of the dragon blood, you've lost half of your rationality. Your attacks are too easily seen through. An attack of this level won't be able to hurt me. After saying those words, Noah's body arrived behind Leola. Then, he ruthlessly chopped down on Leola's neck with his hand. Bam! Amidst the muffled sound, Leola's scarlet eyes widened. Then, her pupils began to slacken. Ugh! Leola staggered a few steps forward and turned her head with difficulty to look at Noah. Noah Dole. After squeezing out those words, Leola fell limply to the ground. Noah extended his hand and caught Leola in his arms. For an instant, Noah could almost clearly feel the softness of Leola's delicate body and the elasticity of her plump upper body. This dragoness is surprisingly well endowed. After leaving such a thought, Noah placed the fainted Leola on the ground. Then he stood up and looked in the direction where Mauya disappeared. A commotion broke out in the surroundings. Clearly, The short exchange between Leola and Maoya earlier had already attracted the attention of the other people. Noah ignored the commotion around him and continued to stare in the direction where Maoya disappeared as he muttered to himself. For sister? At the same time, outside the city tower on the hill, a girl with dark gray pigtails walked out of the shadows and spoke in a very displeased tone. Come out. Just as Maoya's voice fell, a girl suddenly and silently appeared from another shadow. It was a girl who looked older than Maoya and was about 15 or 16 years old. The girl had a coffee-colored complexion. Her hair was emerald green, her eyes were crimson red, and she had a pair of long pointy ears. She was from the same subhuman race as the merchant of the Skeleton Alliance, Vivian, who once gave Vercelia the incantation the Elfi tribe. Maoya spoke in an extremely displeased tone to the girl from the Elfi tribe. Lily, why did you stop me? It would be strange if I didn't stop you, right? The girl from the Elfi tribe named Lily frowned. You actually tried to kill a contestant of the Elven Sword Dance Festival in such a place. Do you want to be disqualified? Maoya doesn't care about that kind of thing. Maoya puffed up her cheeks. As long as I can kill that big brother who is pestering sister, Maoya will be satisfied. But if you do that, Lady Liliana Subble will not be happy. Lily tried to persuade him. Not to mention, you also plan to release the military elf sealed in the ring. That's too wasteful. Anyway, I have to use it sooner or later, right? Maoya didn't look regretful at all and glanced at Lily. Lily, every time Maoya wants to make a move, you always use sister to pressure me. Do you really think Maoya won't kill you? Lily's body froze on the spot. Humph. Maoya coldly snorted and turned away. If there's a next time, Maoya will definitely kill you. Lily heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 1768. Idiot. In a rather spacious room, Claire was throwing a tantrum at Noah. Do you want to be disqualified? Engaging in a personal fight right before the start of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. This matter wasn't a big deal, but it wasn't a small one either. If the members of the House of Gods thought that Noah's personal fight with Leola was hindering his opponent's performance in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, it was entirely possible that it would be considered a violation of the rules. Noah could only express his innocence. I was just passing by. I didn't participate in any personal fight at all. It was that Maoya and Leola who suddenly started pestering me. What could I do? After Leola was knocked out, the people who rushed to the scene due to the huge commotion all thought that Noah and Leola were having a personal fight. It even caused a commotion. Later on, it was Leola who woke up and explained the matter clearly that the commotion stopped. However, Leola seemed to have completely targeted Noah. Before she left, she looked at Noah with a burning desire to battle even though there was no longer any arrogance and bloodthirst in her eyes. You are indeed not a simple person to be able to knock out my elven equipment so easily when I'm in the dragon blood awakening state. I look forward to having a proper battle with you during the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Leola only left after leaving these words that sounded very much like what a battle maniac would say. This made Noah feel like he was being cheated. He was really just passing by. Why did he cause so much trouble? But who is that Maoya? Alice expressed her doubts. She actually attacked a contestant right before the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Even if she wasn't a contestant, she would still be banned by the House of Gods, right? How would I know where that girl came from? Noah sighed. According to what she said, it seems like she wanted to kill me because she didn't want me to pester her sister. Pester her sister? Linley was stunned. Then she looked at Noah in disbelief. Could it be that you attacked a cute girl the moment you arrived? Her words made the other innocent young ladies widen their eyes and cast cold gazes at Noah. So that's how it is. Then it makes sense. Claire glared at Noah. It's because you shamelessly attacked his sister that he wanted to kill you at all costs, right? I didn't expect that the man that Liliana Subble values is actually this kind of person. Fayanna said regretfully. Undoubtedly, you have so many cute girls around you, yet you're still going to attack girls from other countries. Could it be that you, a male elf, have finally awakened your Demon King side? I really misjudged you. Alice teared up as if she had been betrayed. She pulled out the knight sword at her waist and pointed it at Noah's throat. I'm going to make you into chicken risotto. Noah fell silent. A second later, Noah narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself. Can't you have a more interesting reaction? How many times has it been? Seeing that Noah was powerless to explain himself, Claire, Lindley, and Alice acted as if they had found evidence. They became agitated and made a ruckus, which annoyed Noah to no end. At this moment Noah really had the urge to tie all of these girls up. Looking at this scene, Fianna blinked her eyes as though her prank had succeeded. So popular. If this situation was called popular, then Noah sincerely hoped that he was someone who wasn't loved by his uncle or grandma. At this moment a knock on the door sounded, which made the group of girls stop fooling around. Then, before anyone could say anything, the door was directly opened by someone. Immediately after, a small figure suddenly rushed in from outside the door, rushing in the direction of Lin Si-lei. Sister. Following this delicate and crisp voice, a small figure rushed in from outside the door and directly jumped into Lin Si-lei's arms. Wah! Lindley was startled. Everyone also looked over. In Lin Si-lei's arms, a little girl was hugging her tightly. It was a little girl who looked about 10 years old. The little girl had a head of light blonde hair that was as gorgeous and noble as Lin Si-lei's. She was wearing a small white dress, and her clear eyes revealed the innocence of a child. Her appearance was also very cute. Taking a closer look, this little girl was somewhat similar to Lindley. Seeing this little girl, Lindley cried out in surprise. Miryu, why are you here? Hearing this, the little girl called Miryu raised her head and said to Lindley with a happy face, Carol brought me here. As soon as she said this, Carol, who was wearing a maid uniform, ran in while panting. Miss Miryu, it's very rude to enter someone's room without permission. It's okay. The little girl called Miryu said indifferently. Anyway, this is the room of sister and sister's friends. Only then did the crowd realize what was going on. Hey Lindley, Fianna said curiously. Is this your sister? That's right. Lindley nodded. This is my family's youngest sister. As soon as Lindley's voice fell, Malaya broke free from her sister's embrace, lifted her skirt, and courteously performed a standard aristocratic salute to everyone present. I am the third daughter of the Lawrence Frost family. My name is Miryu, please take care of me. Seeing Miryu's courteous appearance, Fianna and Alice had a good impression of her. So polite, as expected of the daughter of a famous noble family. Alice. That's right. Compared to this child, Claire is more like a child. Fianna. Lou. So long-winded. Claire seemed to have some self-awareness and couldn't help but say angrily. I can also be very polite. Noah accidentally made an unexpected sound. What is the meaning of this? Claire immediately flew into a rage. However, this only made Claire seem even more childish. Only Lin Si-lei said with a proud look on her face. Although Miryu is only 9 years old, she has already learned all the etiquette lessons. She is different from Claire. What do you mean by different from me? Claire shouted angrily at Lindley. I've also finished all my etiquette lessons. As soon as she said this, everyone fell silent and looked at Claire with pity. Under that gaze, Claire's delicate body began to tremble. Then she threw herself towards the bed with tears in her eyes. Anyway, I can only compare to a 9-year-old child. And I can't even compare to a fallen noble. Seeing this, everyone didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At this time, Miryu looked straight at Noah and suddenly said, Are you Noah's big brother? Ah. Noah didn't expect Miryu to suddenly mention him and said with uncertainty, You know me? So you are really brother Noah? Miryu suddenly burst into a smile. Of course I know you. You are my sister's private gigolo. Carol told me everything. This sentence almost made Noah fall to the ground. Private gigolo? Alice's eyes widened. I didn't expect that there would be such a development. Even Fianna was shocked. So that's your relationship? Even Claire stuck her head out of the blankets and called out. Me lay you. Lin Si-lei cried out in panic. You, what are you talking about? Did I say something wrong? Miryu tilted her head and said innocently. But Carol undoubtedly told me that brother Noah not only lives in the same room as my sister, but also stole my sister's first kiss? Carol. Lindley's face immediately turned red, and she began to hit Carol's back, making her laugh. As for the other young ladies, they cast cold gazes at Noah again. Noah looked up at the ceiling, speechless. Who asked him to take advantage of her? Chapter 1769. In the elemental elf world, although the 5 sacred domains belonged to different elf kings, the members of the gods' parliament didn't only serve the sacred domain's lord. Instead, all 5 elf kings served them. In almost every holy region, there was a main sacrificial hall for each of the 5 elven kings, as well as a common grand sacrificial hall. Needless to say, the function of the sacrificial hall was the same as the ancestral hall and the shrine. It was a place for worship. As for the sword dance festival of the elves, although there was another venue, the audience would gather in the great sacrificial hall to watch the entire competition through the live broadcast. Therefore, early in the morning, the hall of the great sacrificial hall was filled with spectators from all over the continent. Of course, those who could come to the elemental spirit realm and directly watch the competition couldn't be ordinary civilians. Instead, they were the nobles who had the ability to come here. Apart from the royal family and the nobles, the witch concubines of the fairy trainer cultivation organizations of the various countries could also come here to watch the competition. At the very least, Noah, who was mixed in the crowd, could occasionally see students wearing Alicia Elven Academy uniforms. Oh! Amidst the enthusiastic cheers of the audience, the elves who were about to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival entered the venue in an orderly fashion and ascended the altar at the center of the great sacrificial hall. The surrounding cheers rose and fell one after another. Even if one didn't use their hearts to feel the enthusiasm of the audience, they could clearly feel it. Noah, who had climbed up the altar, saw a circular array. Teleportation array? It seemed that the teleportation array was the channel used to send the contestants to the competition venue. Looking at the teleportation array, Noah began to mutter in his heart, "I hope it works on me." With Noah's special physique that could repel mysteries below the level of gods, if the mysteries were to be used directly on him, they would be ineffective against him. Therefore, Noah could only hope that the teleportation array would not be directly used on a person. Instead, it would be like the gate of the elemental fairies. It would only be effective if it opened a door for him to pass through. If it's the type that directly affects humans, then I hope that the power used by this teleportation array is the power of the Elf King. After all, in this world, the only mystery that could work on Noah was probably the mystery that originated from the Elven King. After muttering to himself, Noah raised his head and looked around. There were a total of 24 teams participating in this year's Fairy Sword Dance Festival. At this moment, the 24 teams representing the various countries had all gathered on the altar. The elven envoys in each of these 24 teams were the elites of their respective countries. Thus, Claire, Lindsley, Fayanna, and Alice were silent, a rare sight. Clearly, they were somewhat nervous. The elven envoys of the other teams seemed to be more or less the same. Some of their faces were filled with nervousness, and even their bodies were completely stiff. Under such circumstances, the atmosphere of a group of people seemed somewhat out of place with the surroundings. They were the elven envoys of the Dragon Emperor Knights that belonged to the Dragon Duchy of Draco, led by Leola. Unlike the other elven envoys, the elven envoys belonging to the Dragon Emperor Knights were like an army. Everyone stood in a row calmly, giving off a sense of oppression. The leader, Leola, also stood there with a calm expression. However, her eyes met with Noah's eyes, and a burning desire to fight surged in them. This situation made Noah sigh inwardly. So I've been targeted? Come to think of it, he had to be more or less on guard against the Dragon Emperor Knights during the Fairy Sword Dance Festival, in case these people suddenly jumped out to cause trouble. At this moment, Claire nudged Noah with her elbow and said nervously, "Don't worry. Look over there." Hearing this, Noah followed Claire's gaze and looked in one direction. There was a team all dressed in black robes there. Looking at that team, Noah's eyes gradually narrowed. Is that the Purgatory Apostles? Without a doubt, that was the Purgatory Apostles that represented the Alpha's empire. In other words, Renasubble was among those people. However, what made Noah more surprised was that among the Purgatory Apostles, there was a person who was obviously shorter in stature. Although the other party covered herself tightly with a black robe, Noah, with his superb sensing ability, was able to distinguish the other party's aura. It was clearly the aura of the girl who called herself Mauya who attacked Noah and Leola last night. So, she's a member of the Purgatory Apostles? Noah's eyes flashed. So, the sister she mentioned, could it be Rena Subble? If that was the case, then everything made sense. In addition, among the group of purgatory apostles, Noah also felt a very strange aura from one of them. How should he describe that aura? Hot. That's right, hot. That person's aura was too hot, so hot that it seemed to be able to completely burn the air. That aura was even above Gray and Vaz, and even close to Rena Subble's. Feeling that aura, Noah slightly frowned. Could it be that she's the person that Lestia mentioned is as scary as Rena Subble? If that was the case, then Lestia wasn't lying. Bang! Just as Noah was lost in thought, a bonfire suddenly burned on the altar. Behind the bonfire, 5 princess-like witch maids in luxurious outfits slowly appeared and bowed in unison. Those are the elf concubines who serve the 5 elf kings. Fianna whispered to Noah. There's almost no chance to see them directly like this, you have to cherish it. Fianna's tone was a bit complicated. That was to be expected. After Rubia Elstian betrayed the elf king, Fianna should have inherited her position and become the new elf concubine. However, at that time, Fianna had already lost her ability as an elf envoy and was forced to withdraw from the election, becoming the so-called lost elf concubine. Now, looking at the 5 elf concubines on the high platform, Fianna's emotions were definitely complicated. However, Fianna's emotions did not stop the flow of time. The appearance of the 5 elf concubines was only to announce the content of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. First, the stage of the Elven Sword Dance Festival was a vast forest area in the north of the floating island. It was a dangerous area where wild magic beasts and wild elves ran rampant. The representatives of each country would be randomly sent in teams, and would compete in the competition for 7 days. Meanwhile, each country's representative contestant would receive a special spirit Oregon. That elf was called a magic stone. The outcome of the competition would be decided by the magic stones. The contestants had to carry the magic stones with them. Once a magic stone was taken away, they had to take it back within 1 minute. Otherwise, the small teleportation array in the magic stone would activate and forcibly teleport the contestant who lost the magic stone back to the Great Shrine. This competition would last for 7 days, and the 4 teams with the most magic stones would be chosen in the end. The 4 teams would then hold the finals to determine the winner. After announcing the content of the competition, the 5 elf concubines formed a hand seal. Clank! On the altar, the teleportation array began to blossom with light, illuminating the entire altar. At this moment, the competition officially began. Okay. Noah looked at his 4 teammates. Let's go in. Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice all took a deep breath and heavily nodded at the same time. Under the cheers of the audience, all the contestants began to step into the teleportation array and disappeared in the light. Noah also led the girls and stepped into the teleportation array. Suddenly, Noah raised his head and looked in a direction. There, Lotus Asubble raised her head and revealed her delicate and pretty face, looking at him. While looking at each other, Noah and Lotus slowly disappeared in the light. What could be called a predestined showdown was merely the announcement of the start. Chapter 1770. Whoosh! An extremely cold gale blew through the space, causing the temperature in the air to suddenly drop a lot, reaching a degree comparable to the cold of winter. Although this was a vast forest, it was still somewhat gloomy. A hazy mist filled the air. The cries of birds and beasts could be heard from afar. In the forest, low-ranked fairies floated aimlessly like balls of light, emitting a faint halo. Whoosh! The cold wind blew through the forest, blowing away the hazy mist. However, it quickly brought back the mist from afar, causing the visibility to become even lower. Those light ball-like fairies weren't affected at all. They continued to float back and forth in the space, appearing very unique. In a dazzling light, Noah's group was teleported to the depths of the forest. As soon as he appeared, Claire, Fianna, and Alice's group all shuddered at the same time. Ah! Fianna let out a sorrowful cry and hugged her body tightly. It's so cold. Yeah. Even Alice, who had a contract with a wind fairy, couldn't help but shudder. Her lips were pale as she spoke. Why is it so cold here? Cold? Lindsay Lay, on the other hand, brushed her long hair back as usual, completely unaffected by it. Is it cold? I don't think so. Don't compare us to you. Claire glanced at Linley. You're not only an ice fairy, but your hometown is also in the snowy mountains at the border. How can you feel cold? It is indeed cold at the border. Noah reached out his hand and brushed the cold wind around them. It should be because this place is at the northern border of the floating island, so it's cold, right? In fact, if it weren't for the fact that Noah's group was wearing the Alicia Elven Academy student uniform, they would be shivering from the cold. The Alicia Elven Academy student uniform was protected by elven magic. Not only did it protect them from the cold, but it also provided some protection no matter what kind of environment they were in. And under such circumstances, the group of girls except for Linley still felt cold. One could imagine how cold it would be without the protection of the uniform. However, Linsley, who was used to the harsh environment of the snowy mountain, was disdainful of this degree of cold. When Noah was young, he had practiced cultivation in the deep mountains and forests for several years. During that time he had also encountered various harsh environments, so he had developed a certain immunity to the cold. Therefore, other than Noah and Linley, the other girls felt very cold. Finally, Claire couldn't take it anymore and reached out a hand. Flames burn. A flame suddenly ignited in Claire's hand and turned into a fireball, illuminating the surroundings and releasing a warm heat. Frianna and Alice immediately approached and put their hands on it. Frianna heaved a sigh of relief. "We're saved?" "This is ridiculous," Linley said as if she couldn't take it anymore. "If I can't even withstand this level of cold, what should I do next?" Claire and Alice suddenly remembered after hearing Linley's words. The competition would last for a whole 7 days. If they couldn't stand this environment now, then what would they do at night? Only Frianna was smiling calmly. "Don't worry, as long as we find a place to settle down, I will set up multiple barriers there and turn it into our stronghold. When the time comes, we will add a cold barrier and be able to sleep comfortably at night." Hearing this, the group of girls felt relieved. Noah also nodded in agreement. A stronghold was very important. At least, with a stronghold protected by layers of barriers, Noah's group didn't have to worry about being attacked and could sleep comfortably at night. Moreover, as a former elven maiden candidate, the barriers set up by Frianna were definitely not as simple as protection. Frianna could rely on her superb ritual music to set up all kinds of barriers to protect the elven users, greatly increasing the strength of the elven users, and displaying all kinds of blessings such as eliminating fatigue, which would be of great help in battle. It's not just a battle. I can also set up a trap enchantment to make our enemies unable to return. I can also tame the wild spirits within the enchantment and make them help us fight, Frianna said with great confidence. The other teams will definitely build a stronghold as soon as possible, but in terms of the level of the stronghold, I'm confident that it won't lose to any team. This way, with this stronghold, the safety of the team could be guaranteed. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Claire, Linley, and Alice immediately clapped. As expected of your highness, the former elven maiden candidate, so reliable. Hearing this, Frianna smiled bitterly. But that's all I can do. In terms of fighting, I can only rely on you guys. My fighting ability isn't very strong. In any case, Frianna had never been trained by an orthodox elven user. Instead, she had been studying in the Gods' Parliament and had a deep understanding of ritualistic music. However, in terms of sword dance, she was weaker than all the elven users in this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival. Not to mention other things, Frianna hadn't even learned how to use the elven device, so she wouldn't be of much use in battle. Of course, in terms of defense, I can still be of some use. Frianna sighed. At least, there shouldn't be many elven users who can break Giacius's shield. Then, I can provide you with ritualistic music in battle. That's enough. Noah smiled slightly. You just need to let the contracted elves protect you. The rest is to concentrate on the ritualistic music. Leave the rest to us. Claire, Linley, and Alice all nodded, which made Frianna's expression look much better. So, what kind of place should we look for as our base? Alice looked around at her surroundings. This doesn't seem very suitable. That's true, Noah said after pondering for a while. If possible, it's ideal to find a small hill that's easy to defend and hard to attack. However, we still have to consider the problem of food and water, so it's better to set up a base not far from a river or lake. Everyone nodded. During the Elven Sword Dance Festival, the contestants could bring some necessities with them, but there was a limit to the weight. In other words, they could only bring items up to a certain weight. Anything more than that would be considered a violation of the rules. Because of this, everyone put their necessities in Noah's gift card. But the things they could take out were limited. Otherwise, with Mila and Lisanna preparing large amounts of food and water for Noah, they wouldn't have to worry about this problem at all. Moreover, food was one thing, but the water source was very important. As an elven envoy, Magus G had to maintain the purity of her body at all times. Otherwise, the holiness of her body would decrease, and her ability to communicate with the elves would be reduced. If her body was too dirty, she might not even be able to summon the elves, let alone command them or even fight. Therefore, it was very important to be able to bathe in water and wash away the filth on her body. The elven envoys of the other team should be showing off their skills and looking for a base and opponent, right? Noah looked at Alice. Alice, can I trouble you to summon a few wind elves to scout the surroundings? Can I? It wasn't Alice who said this. It was Claire who said this. The competition has already begun. Wouldn't it be too conspicuous to use elven magic at this time? Conspicuous. Noah laughed. If we can attract 1 or 2 teams like this, that would be ideal. As long as it wasn't the Purgatory Apostles, no matter what kind of team they were, they would just be sending themselves to their deaths. With me holding the fort and Fianna's protection, we can fight without worry. I believe that we won't lose. The hearts of the group of young girls suddenly felt their blood boiling. Chapter 1771. In the depths of the misty forest, Fianna held a round fan used for ritual and danced gracefully like a cool breeze caressing her face. Ding ding ding. Every time Fianna danced, the bell at the end of the round fan in her hand would make a pleasant sound, like a beautiful melody, rhythmically reverberating in the air. Clang! Following Fianna's dance, the ground began to blossom with splendor. Bathed in the splendor, Claire, Linley, and Alice all felt it. Their state was growing at a very frightening rate. The godly power flowing in their bodies gradually changed from a slow-moving stream to a roaring torrent. Their bodies seemed to have inexhaustible strength, and hot streams burst forth from every corner. That kind of feeling made the group of young girls let out satisfied sounds, and their expressions became somewhat excited. At this moment, the group of girls all received the blessing of Fianna's ritual music, and their strength showed a qualitative leap. In this state, if their original fighting strength was about 2 or 3, then after the blessing of the ritual music, it became 4 or 5. In other words, under the blessing of Fianna's ritual music, the group of girls' fighting strength nearly doubled. As if to strike while the iron was hot, Alice chanted an incantation composed of Elvish. Wind, please bring me a gift from afar. Grant me a peeping eye. Suddenly bird-like elves slowly appeared around Alice like flickering light spots. After hovering around Alice for a while, they immediately spread their wings and flew in all directions. Almost at the same time, Claire and Linley also chanted the contract used to summon elves. Guardian of the red flames, keeper of the sleepless furnace, here to fulfill the blood contract, listen to my command, cold beasts with ice fangs, heartless hunters of the forest, here to fulfill the blood contract, listen to my command. The elven mark on the back of the 2 girls' hands flashed at the same time. In the next second, a flaming whip and a crystal-like bow appeared in Claire's and Linley's hands, tightly gripping them in their hands. Immediately after, Claire and Linley stood on either side of Fianna, who was performing the ritual, and Alice, who was concentrating on commanding the wind elves used for investigation, protecting the 2. Looking at this scene, Noah nodded secretly. Although they had been separated for an entire month, the tacit understanding that they had developed during their training as a team had not disappeared. Thus, Noah also moved lightly and arrived behind the group of girls to provide support for them. Around them, fairies that looked like balls of light danced around them. It was a servant spirit trained by Wuxia of the gods' parliament. It was in charge of transmitting the images of the competition back to the great sacrificial hall, so that everyone could see the entire process clearly. Due to their training, these servant spirits would not intrude into places that would invade one's privacy, nor would they transmit the images back. Therefore, the elven envoys could still carry on with the competition at ease. However, the work that Noah and the rest were doing at this moment was not considered private. Therefore, this image should be transmitted back to the great sacrificial hall very clearly for everyone to see, right? Under such circumstances, everyone worked wholeheartedly on their own work. At a certain moment, Alice opened her eyes and exclaimed in delight. Found it! There's a place that's relatively close to here, and it's also near a water source. Alice's words made everyone's eyes light up. However, in the next moment, Alice's expression froze, revealing a startled expression. How? How could it be? Seeing this, everyone's hearts tightened. What's wrong? Noah asked directly. Did you see something? No. Alice hesitated for a moment, then said with some vexation. It's just that the wind spirit that I used seemed to have been discovered by some team, and it was shot down. Alice's words made Claire, Linley, and Fianna somewhat surprised. It was discovered so quickly? Claire said with extreme surprise. How could it be? Although she was not at the level of Leola and Versilia, Alice's ability as an elven envoy was also quite outstanding. She was second to none in the Elven Academy of Alicia, and without a doubt, she would not lose to the elites of the elven envoys from other countries. Now, after the blessing of Fianna, who was once an elven maiden candidate, the wind spirit that Alice used was discovered so quickly. This was really out of everyone's expectations. Only Noah's eyes flashed, and the corners of his mouth slowly lifted. After the blessing of Fianna, there were definitely no more than 3 teams in the entire Elven Sword Dance Festival that had the ability to discover Alice's wind spirit and shoot it down so quickly. And among them, there was only one team that had the highest possibility. Hey Alice, Noah suddenly asked. Where was the location where your wind spirit was shot down? About a few hundred meters to the east from here, Alice answered without any hesitation. My wind spirit was immediately shot down as soon as it flew into that area. Is that so? Noah nodded and asked again. Then where is the stronghold that you found? It's in the opposite direction to the west from where the wind spirit was shot down. It's about a few hundred meters from here, Alice answered obediently. There's a small lake there and the location is more remote. There are also no signs of other teams nearby, so it's the most suitable place for us that I found. There are no signs of other teams nearby. Noah suddenly smiled. Very good. Then you guys go there immediately and set up the stronghold. Us. The group of girls were all stunned. What about you? Lindsay Lay asked with some uncertainty. Aren't you coming with us? Give me some time. Noah turned around, his back facing the group of girls, his voice softly drifting into everyone's ears. I want to go and greet some acquaintances first. At the same time, in a forest clearing a few hundred meters away from where Noah and the others were, the bird-like wind spirit fell down as if its wings were broken, gradually turning into light particles and disappearing. The black-robed Lily looked at the gradually disappearing wind spirit on the ground, slightly twirling the dagger in her hand, as if deep in thought. Beside her, Maoya seemed bored as she lifted her hood and said, There's already a team that has set their sights on us so quickly? It shouldn't be that we're being targeted. It's just some random scouting by another team. Lily shook her head. I shot it down immediately just now, so the opponent doesn't even know which team it was that shot down her wind spirit, right? They didn't even have time to send back the information. Maoya smiled innocently. As expected of Lily, she's the best at such little tricks. In the Purgatory Apostles team, the elfie girl named Lily wasn't the best at direct combat, but excellent scouting. In this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival, there was probably no one better at scouting than Lily. Therefore, Lily's anti-scouting ability was also excellent, and she instantly discovered the wind spirit that came to scout. Compared to Lily, Maoya didn't have so many little tricks, and she didn't even know how to cook. However, Maoya was a super expert who was trained as an elven master who specialized in using military elves, and her body was even implanted with spell engravings that could maximize the power of military elves to the greatest extent. In terms of combat ability, as long as Maoya had enough military elves to command, even 10 lilies wouldn't be a match for her. It was also because of this that in Maoya's eyes, Lily's actions were just little tricks. And Lily naturally understood this point, so she ignored Maoya, turned around, and looked at Red Lotus who was standing silently by the side. Lady Red Lotus, do you need me to see who sent that wind spirit? This sentence attracted a somewhat pretentious voice. Why don't you let me have some fun? Chapter 1772. Why don't you let me have some fun? With such a voice, the atmosphere in the entire space became tense. Soon after, a young woman seemed to appear out of nowhere behind Hong Lian, Maoya, and Lily. She slowly walked forward. It was a girl with beautiful blue hair that was cut to the side of her neck. The bright color of her hair was quite eye-catching. She was wearing a flirtatious dancer's costume and had a thin veil covering the lower half of her face. She was a young girl that seemed out of place with the other members of the Purgatory Apostles. The young girl had a hazy smile on her face as she said so. Although the Elven Sword Dance Festival has just begun, I can't wait to go hunting. The young girl's words made Lily frown and made Maoya show an unhappy expression. However, it did not make Red Lotus waver in the slightest. Even if she was wearing a mask that could cover all her face, Red Lotus' calmness could be clearly seen by everyone. Therefore, Red Lotus did not even turn her head and said so with an almost emotionless voice. Which, it's fine if you want to act on your own, but if you hinder me because of this, you should know the consequences. Hearing this, the young girl slightly raised her eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "That's really scary, but do you dare to make a move against me?" The young girl's words were not without reason. The young girl's name was Sarah Khan. She was the princess of the Alpha Empire, and also the fifth member of the Purgatory Apostles. Although she was a member, in fact, as seen on the surface, Sarah was very out of place in the Purgatory Apostles. The reason was very simple. It was because Sarah was not on the same side as the others. No. It should be said that the Purgatory Apostles were not on the same side in the first place. Lotus accepted Red Lotus' invitation to join the Purgatory Apostles because she wanted to be able to fight Noah. Red Lotus connected with the Alpha Empire for her own purpose and attempted to use the Alpha Empire to sneak into the Elven Sword Dance Festival. She even wanted to obtain enough benefits from the Alpha Empire. Maoya and Lily were the same as Lotus. They were both orphans in the academy. The difference was that Maoya maintained an almost morbid longing for Lotus. No matter what, she only listened to Lotus. Lily was unusually loyal to Red Lotus and gave her everything to Red Lotus. Because of this, the two of them became the third and fourth members of the Purgatory Apostles, barely forming a team. As for Sarah, she was completely sent by the Alpha Empire to monitor the rest of the people. Therefore, this team was not united at all. Instead, it was truly fragmented. At the very least, Sarah would never be completely devoted to Red Lotus. As the princess of the Alphas Empire, Sarah did not believe that Red Lotus, who had been using the name of the Alphas Empire in all aspects, would attack her at this time. However, this confidence was quickly. Red Lotus's entire body seemed to be burning with flames. Red light rippled from the outline of her body. She turned her head, and under the ghostly mask, a pair of eyes that seemed to be emitting scarlet light was nailed to Sarah's body. "Do you want to give it a try, witch?" Sensing the terrifying aura emanating from Hong Lian's body, the smile on Sarah's face froze. After a moment of silence, she raised her hand in surrender. Okay, I'm just kidding. Don't take it so seriously." Red Lotus did not say anything else. Instead, she looked straight at Sarah. When the smile on Sarah's face began to change, Red Lotus withdrew her gaze and said, "You should understand. The Alpha Empire provided me with an identity so that I could participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. They even provided Maoya with military elves. That's just a deal. You support us, and we will use the victory of the Elven Sword Dance Festival as a reward to let the Alpha Empire obtain the protection of the Elven King. To put it bluntly, we are using each other. So, put away your so-called princess act and don't test my patience." Sarah couldn't help but feel a little angry when she heard his rude words. However, she had to admit that Sarah did not have the right to be angry. Just like what Red Lotus said, they were only using each other with the Alpha Empire. That was why the Alpha Empire sent Sarah to monitor Red Lotus and the others. In other words, Red Lotus was only being monitored by the Alpha Empire. She was not being allowed to do whatever she wanted. If Sarah had really ruined the plan that Red Lotus had painstakingly planned because of her unauthorized actions, Red Lotus would definitely not mind killing Sarah. Unfortunately, Sarah had not found a way to fight against Red Lotus yet. Left with no choice, Sarah could only swallow her anger in her heart. However, since Sarah was called the witch, she was not someone to be trifled with. "I'll remember what happened today. Don't give me a chance." With that thought in mind, Sarah suddenly thought of something. She turned her head and looked in another direction. Her eyes glowed as if she was staring at her prey. Besides, my mission is not just to monitor you. As far as Sarah's eyes could see, Lotus had been silently looking into the distance. Her black robe fluttered in the wind. Even her long black hair that reached her waist swayed. There was no expression on her delicate face. She looked very illusory. That scene caused Sarah's entire body to tremble when she saw it. She's so beautiful. She's so beautiful that I can't help but want to destroy her. The Alpha Empire was the base of the Demon King's faith. It was the birthplace of the former Demon King Solomon. Of course, there were as many people in the Alpha Empire who had their eyes on the Demon King. Sarah was one of them. The Demon King belongs to me. No one can take him away. Sarah thought silently in her heart. At this moment, Lily's eyes suddenly widened as she yelled out, "Hey, hey! Watch out!" As soon as her voice fell, buzz, accompanied by the sound of the air trembling, a huge beam of light suddenly fell from the sky. It streaked across the space and shot directly in the direction of the Purgatory Apostles. Everyone's expression changed one after another. In the next moment, the beam of light fell from the sky heavily on the open space where the Purgatory Apostles were. Boom! A deafening roar resounded. The huge beam of light directly blasted the ground, setting off a shocking blast and terrifying flames. Like a big explosion, it shook and suddenly swept across the surroundings. In an instant, the ground was blown up inch by inch. Pieces of gravel and debris splashed in all directions. The trees closest to the open space were also as if they were hit by a hurricane. Under the shocking blast, they were crushed and fell together. They were covered by the flames that swept across and burned. In just a moment, the entire open space was as if it was attacked by artillery. It turned into a tragic sea of fire. As a result, the Purgatory Apostles were blown away by the blast. Maya, Lily, and Sarah directly rolled on the ground, looking extremely miserable. At the moment when Lotus and Red Lotus were blown away, their bodies suddenly spun and landed very steadily on the ground. Their soles rubbed against the ground and they flew all the way, leaving 2 faint traces on the ground. Who? Red Lotus raised her head, and her voice was unprecedentedly cold. Come out. Lotus, on the other hand, suddenly clutched her heart and her eyes began to shake. Because at this moment Lotus could feel that her heart was throbbing violently. In Lotus' memory there was only one person who could make her heart react like this. Is he here? Lotus looked at the sea of fire in front of her with a dignified expression. He actually came so quickly? Hearing Lotus' words, Red Lotus seemed to understand something. Her eyes began to flicker as she looked straight ahead. There, the sea of fire was slowly burning, and the originally cold space began to glow and heat up. Then Lotus and Red Lotus both saw it. In the sea of fire a figure slowly walked out. Not only was there not a trace of dust on his pure white uniform, but even the flames attached to it did not burn. Then the newcomer met Lotus and Red Lotus' gaze, and a smile gradually appeared on his face. It really is you. It couldn't be better if I guessed correctly. Chapter 1773. The Purgatory Apostles were dumbfounded when they saw the person walking towards them from within the sea of fire. It's really him, Red Lotus whispered. Big brother. Maya was surprised. It's him. Lily's face was tense. A male elven envoy? Sarah, on the other hand, was extremely angry at her own wretched appearance. Then she looked at Noah in surprise. Naturally, the Alpha Theocracy would not fail to notice Noah's appearance. After all, the only male elven envoy in history was the Demon King Solomon. Not long ago, when Noah appeared as a male elven envoy, the higher-ups of the Alpha Theocracy were excited. They thought that the Demon King had reincarnated into Noah's body. It was not until later that Red Lotus revealed that Renasubal was the real Demon King. The higher-ups of the Alpha Theocracy threw Noah aside and no longer cared about him. However, in terms of intelligence, the Alpha Theocracy had more or less grasped a part of it. Therefore, Sarah was still aware of Noah's existence. She also knew that Ren's target for participating in the Elven Sword Dance Festival was him. Thinking of this, Sarah's eyes turned slightly. A sinister light appeared in her eyes as she looked at Noah. Since Renasubal cares so much about him, if I can capture him. As soon as this plan appeared in Sarah's mind, a line of sight suddenly locked onto Sarah. At this moment, Sarah only felt as if she was being stared at by a terrifying existence. All the pores on her body suddenly exploded. Then Sarah realized. The male elven envoy with the sea of fire as the background was staring at her with a pair of deep, dark eyes. Immediately, Sarah heard such a sentence. Although I don't know who you are, the way you look at me makes me feel very uncomfortable. After saying that, a gorgeous magic square suddenly rotated in front of Noah. An astonishing amount of magic power gathered inside and turned into a beam of light. Like a meteor, it streaked across the space and shot towards Sarah's direction. Dong! The beam of light landed right in front of Sarah, exploding the ground. The sudden burst of wind blew Sarah away before she could react. She crashed heavily into a tree trunk not far away. The intense pain from her back caused Sarah to let out a muffled groan. Following which, her body slid down the tree trunk and collapsed onto the ground. The entire place fell silent. You? Lily's expression changed abruptly. She took a few steps back and became alert. Clearly, Lily did not expect Noah to launch an attack as soon as he appeared. Moreover, he did not show any mercy. No, Noah was already being very lenient. Otherwise, that blow wouldn't have landed on the ground. Instead, it would have landed on Sarah and blasted her into smithereens. No matter what, the Elven Sword Dance Festival does not allow the killing of contestants. I have already shown mercy. As he said this, Noah turned his head and glanced at the silent Hong Lian. Then he looked at Lotus and said with a faint smile, "Don't worry, I'm not going to tell you anything. How is it? Do you like this surprise?" Lotus did not answer. Instead, she slowly got up. On the back of her hand, an elven inscription flickered and sputtered out pitch-black lightning. The pitch-black lightning burst out in front of Lotus and gradually converged. It transformed into a pitch-black, ominous-looking demon sword that was stabbed straight into the ground. Vorpal's sword, penetrating truth. The demon sword formed by the highest-ranking dark elf under the Demon King was now standing in front of Lotus. However, Lotus did not pull out the pitch-black demon sword. Instead, she stared at Noah and spoke softly. "I didn't expect you to find me when the competition has just begun. I thought our duel would be left until the finals. That's normal. After all, the more exciting things are, the more they should be left until the end. That's the true meaning of the competition," Noah said calmly. "So, I thought, why don't I greet you first and see what kind of people your teammates are?" As soon as he finished speaking, the elven inscription on the back of Noah's hand also flashed and emitted a dazzling light. It was an extremely beautiful white light. In the white light, a burst of light particles flashed like stars and turned into a small galaxy. After circling around Noah's body for a while, it landed on the ground. The next moment, a silver holy sword formed from the light particles. Like the pitch-black demon sword, it was stabbed into the ground upside down. Demon Slayer. The holy sword formed by the strongest sword elf that had once annihilated Demon King Solomon stood in front of Noah. Noah and Lotus raised their eyes and stared at each other. Their gazes met in mid-air, causing extremely intense sparks to fly between them. In the next second, the two disappeared at the same time. The holy sword and the demon sword that were stabbed into the ground also disappeared without a trace. And almost at the same time, the two people holding the silver holy sword and the pitch-black demon sword suddenly appeared in the center of the field. The elven devices in their hands carried the power of 1,000 caddies. One of them was like a sweeping army, while the other was like a falling thunder. They heavily hacked at each other. Clang! When the bell-like sound of metal clashing resounded through the entire space, an extremely ferocious divine energy fluctuation violently surged out from the center of the field, extinguishing the sea of fire in a radius of several dozen meters around the holy sword and demonic sword that were clashing together. The silver holy sword and the pitch-black demon sword constantly rubbed against each other, creating extremely strong sparks. The eyes of Noah and Lotus, who were looking at each other through the elven devices, burned with red light. Wang! Gorgeous white light and pitch-black lightning bloomed from the swords of the elven devices at the same time. They intertwined with each other, as if they were fighting for territory. They went back and forth, causing the space to tremble. Immediately, Lotus suddenly withdrew. The demon sword in her hand strangely turned. The tip of the sword directly rubbed against the edge of the holy sword, creating a burst of sparks. She violently slashed in the direction of Noah and suddenly stabbed at him. A sharp sound of breaking air and an ear-piercing sound of friction resounded. However, at the same time, Noah suddenly tightened his grip on the holy sword in his hand, as if he was blocking the demon sword that was rubbing against the edge of the holy sword. Without any warning, he suddenly flicked his sword upwards. Clang! Under the crisp sound of collision, the demon sword that was violently stabbing at Noah's direction was suddenly flicked away. This caused Lotus' figure to shake. Her whole body was shaken and her whole body was shaken back, causing her front to be exposed. At this moment, Noah suddenly took a step back. The holy sword in his hand was suffused with a gorgeous light. Absolute sword skill. Primary form purple lightning. A lightning-like stab was released from Noah's hand. It turned into a cold light that was like a meteor. It mercilessly stabbed at Lotus' exposed front. The lightning-like stab caused the strong wind from the tip of the sword to scrape Lotus' body like a blade, causing her skin to feel a tingling sensation. At this moment, Lotus' eyes hardened. Without any hesitation, she gave up on stabilizing her body. The tip of her foot twisted on the ground. Her body spun like she was dancing. The demon sword that was flicked away drew a perfect arc and slashed in the direction of Noah. Absolute sword skill. Third form Shadow Moon Dance. The third form, which was originally suitable for group attacks, was actually used by Lotus at this moment. As a result, the moonlight-like slash cut across the space. It was like a cold light, but also like a gentle moonlight. With an unconcealable sharpness, it swept in front of Lotus like a thunderbolt. It just happened to meet the holy sword that was thrusting at her like lightning. Clang! The sound of steel colliding with steel reverberated in the air. It was mixed with bursting sparks that suddenly appeared in the space. Under the sudden appearance of the sparks, Noah and Lotus both seemed to be sent flying. They quickly retreated. The tips of their feet repeatedly tapped on the ground, and they moved like rabbits running away from each other. Lily and Maoya's faces were filled with shock at this scene. Red Lotus' eyes also focused little by little. From the beginning of the conflict between the two people to the fierce exchange to being sent flying at the same time, the whole process took less than 10 seconds. Within those 10 seconds, a sword dance of a level that ordinary elves would find hard to imagine was displayed in front of everyone present. Chapter 1774. Clang! Dazzling white light continuously flashed from the demon slayer and dyed the surrounding sea of fire into a vast expanse of white. Wong! Not to be outdone, a pitch-black lightning blossomed from the Vorpal's sword. Holding the famous holy sword and demon sword in their hands, Noah and Lotus looked at each other, suppressing their emotions from the sword dance just now. If they didn't do so, the two of them would definitely attack each other again, recklessly charging at each other. Unfortunately, whether it was Noah or Lotus, they were not the kind of people who would be manipulated by their emotions, causing them to reveal flaws. Therefore, the two of them could only silently suppress their inner emotions, and at the same time silently looked at each other. Both of them could see the burning emotions in each other's eyes. Tightly holding the silver holy sword that shone with dazzling white light, Noah murmured in a low voice. As elven users who both use absolute sword skills, it seems that it will be very difficult to determine the winner in this aspect. At the very most, Noah had learned the absolute sword skills for less than half a year. Lotus, on the other hand, had learned the absolute sword skills from Gray and Vath after escaping from the teaching academy 4 years ago. In terms of time, the proficiency of the absolute sword skills that the two of them had mastered was not at the same level at all. However, the power of the absolute sword skills that Noah used was not below that of Lotus. The reason was not that Noah was more talented than Lotus in swordsmanship, but because the Godslayer would become stronger as long as he fought. In less than half a year, Noah had improved his absolute sword skills. But even so, if they only used the absolute sword skills, Noah was still unable to suppress Lotus. It could be seen that Lotus was talented in swordsmanship, and how long she had been immersed in it. Lotus seemed to have the same feeling, looking straight at Noah, and said so. It seems that if we only compete in swordsmanship, we won't be able to determine the winner. An extremely dense darkness began to fluctuate from Lotus's body. So, I'll have to show some of my true abilities. As she said this, the dense darkness that fluctuated from Lotus's body turned into a fierce divine power, madly pouring into Lotus's body. Wong! Instantly, the elven device in Lotus's hand, named Vorpal Sword, emitted an even deeper black lightning. It grew stronger and stronger, to the point where one's eyeballs started to hurt from the intensity of the lightning. Feeling the surging divine power continuously pouring into Lotus's body, Noah's eyes gradually narrowed. Noah could clearly feel it. Lotus's aura once every second. The divine power of energy that Lotus's aura, and Lotus's aura, it was extremely of Lotus's aura. Of Lotus's, of course, of Lotus's, of Lotus, of course, Lotus's body, Lotus's of his, of Lotus, of Lotus, of Lotus, of Lotus. Soon after, Lotus slowly opened her mouth. The Elven King is the embodiment of the world's elements, a transcendent existence that is in charge of the world's elements. My body contains the power of the Dark Elven King, and this power is related to it in my heart, so I can perfectly control it. Do you know what this means? While speaking, the dark flames burning from Lotus's body continued to expand, and Lotus's aura also continued to strengthen. It means that, like the Elven King, I can control the world's elements. Whether it's the human world or the world of elemental elves, the element of darkness will fall under my control. I can obtain power comparable to the Elven King, and by continuously absorbing the element of darkness, I can transform it into endless divine power. I can even let my body undergo rapid regeneration, making it eternal. What you need to face is this kind of power. The dark flames burning from Lotus's body had already expanded to the point where they soared into the sky and into the clouds. Finally, when it had expanded to the limit, Lotus's aura had skyrocketed to the point where Noah had to face it. At this moment, Noah could feel a faint threat from Lotus's body. At the same time, Lotus's aura also told Noah the extent of her power. That aura was already more powerful than Naz, who had obtained Ignir's power. And Naz, who had obtained Ignir's power, was infinitely close to 4 digits. More powerful than Naz at that time, which meant that Lotus had reached that level. 4 digits. That was already enough of a threat. Noah smiled. His smile was very pleasant. Very good. Otherwise, it wouldn't be interesting. As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying divine power also skyrocketed from Noah's body, turning into a huge phosphorescent beam of light. It stirred the air, and in the tremor of space soared into the sky, straight into the clouds, forming a contrast with the dark flame pillar. Although I don't have the power of the Elven King, my Aster's power is not inferior to the Elven King's. I can't control the elements of the human world and the elemental world to obtain an eternal body, but if it's just endless divine power, I also have it. Noah pointed the demon slayer in his hand that was emitting a dazzling white light at Lotus, whose pupils were slowly shrinking, and made a declaration in an unrestrained manner. The strongest sword dancer, the successor of the Demon King, the reincarnation of the Dark Elven King, do you want to compete with me to see who is stronger? The astonishing divine power was like a violent hurricane, turning into a dazzling beam of light that soared into the sky, while stirring up layers of waves of impact, stirring up the surrounding atmosphere, and causing the ground where Noah was standing to shake slightly. In response, Lotus only raised the demon sword in her hand, and a smile appeared on her delicate face. You are indeed very strong. This is good. If not, then I can't verify whether my fate should be changed by you. After saying that, Lotus also pointed the elven magic device at Noah, and loudly declared, "Come, prove that you are stronger than me." The dense darkness that swelled from Lotus' body became violent, as if it was stirring up the atmosphere of the entire world, repeatedly shaking. Under such circumstances, the atmosphere in the space became more and more tense, causing Maya and Lily, who were suppressed in place by the 2 terrifying powers, to hold their breaths, and their faces became pale little by little. Just as this unprecedented battle was about to break out, Noah suddenly changed the topic. However, let's leave this matter for later. After saying that, the terrifying divine power that burst out from Noah's body dissipated in the air little by little, and finally completely disappeared. Maya was stunned. Lily was stunned. Even Lotus was stunned on the spot, and for a moment she didn't have time to react. I've said it before. I'm just here to say hello. Noah shrugged. Being able to confirm the extent of your true strength is already a great gain. As he spoke, Noah glanced to the side and curled his lips into a smile. Besides, if I continue to fight with Lotus Asubble, you won't continue to watch, right? Miss Unknown? Lotus seemed to remember something and looked to the side. There, wearing a ghostly mask, Red Lotus was staring straight at Noah, a faint flame fluctuating from her body. While everyone was stunned by the power of Noah and Lotus, Red Lotus was the only one who didn't show any abnormality. And the aura that fluctuated from Red Lotus' body made Noah certain that this person was not simple. Although I am very curious about you, it is somewhat troublesome to face the two of you at once. Today's greeting will end here. Noah looked at Lotus. See you next time, Lord Demon King. As soon as he finished speaking, Noah tapped the tip of his foot and leaped backward. He leaped into the burning sea of fire and disappeared. Lily stood up almost reflexively, but was greeted by Red Lotus' indifferent voice. Don't chase, even if you catch up, you are not his opponent. Lily froze in place and fell silent. Lotus stared in the direction where Noah disappeared, her eyes never moving, standing in place for a long time without moving. Chapter 1775. In a distant corner of the forest, the sea of fire was still burning slowly, causing the trees to be set ablaze one by one, slowly expanding the range of the fire. Under such circumstances, many fire elves in the forest began to rush towards the direction of the sea of fire excitedly, while many water elves came to the edge of the sea of fire and began to extinguish the fire in an attempt to stop the spread of the sea of fire. It wasn't that these elves loved this forest, but that the water elves didn't like the environment of the sea of fire, so they wanted to extinguish the fire. As for the other elves in the forest, they also began to get busy. Some left the sea of fire, while some rushed towards the sea of fire, causing the originally gloomy forest to become lively. Among these elves, there must be elves enslaved by the other participants of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Right? After all, with such a huge commotion, it would attract the attention of the other participants no matter what. Those elven envoys who discovered the commotion would definitely be eager to know what was happening in the direction of the sea of fire. Hence, it wasn't strange for the elven envoys to investigate. However, just as these elven envoys were rushing towards the direction of the sea of fire, a figure flew over like a ray of light in the opposite direction and landed on an empty ground, revealing his full appearance. Sensing that many elven envoys were rushing towards the direction of the sea of fire, Noah couldn't help but spread his hands slightly. Have we gone a little too far? The Elven Sword Dance Festival had just begun. Therefore, the reason why Noah found trouble with the Purgatory Apostles was really just to greet the Purgatory Apostles. Of course, it wasn't on a whim. Noah just wanted to test the strength of the elven envoys in the Purgatory Apostles. After the commotion, Noah felt a little more confident in his heart. Moya, Lily, and Sarah were not worth mentioning to Noah at all. However, Lotus's strength, Noah finally tested it out. The strength of the Dark Elven King really can't be underestimated. The Elven King who ruled over the various elements that made up the world and ruled over all the elves. To put it in an extreme way, these existences were the world itself. In the Elven Wars of the ancient era, the Dark Elven King was able to fight against the other 5 Elven Kings by himself. One could well imagine how powerful the Dark Elven King was. Thinking back to Claire, her elder sister betrayed the Fire Elf King. In a fit of rage, the Fire Elf King unleashed a continuous stream of fire on the entire Ordesia Empire, almost destroying it. As an existence that could fight against the other 5 Elf Kings at the same time, the Dark Elf King shouldn't be weaker than the Fire Elf King, right? At the very least, it could destroy an entire country in the blink of an eye. Now, because of the world fragment, it was completely controlled by a human. No matter how useless this human was, he could still threaten the entire world. Take the former Demon King Solomon for example. Even though he was devoured by the power of the Dark Elf King and completely turned into a lump of resentment, he still almost destroyed the entire continent. As an existence who had perfect control of that power, Lotus's strength could only be stronger than Solomon's. Thus, long before Noah more or less had some guesses about Lotus's strength. Even Akonarolia, who also destroyed a huge country, can reach 4 digits. It's not strange that Lotus can reach 4 digits. As he muttered to himself, Noah fell into deep thought. But that masked elven envoy, even when Lotus and I revealed our true strength, she was still able to remain calm. Could it be that she really has the same level of strength as Lotus? If that was really the case, then it meant that there were 2 4-digit existences among the Purgatory Apostles. Even if it was Noah facing 2 4-digit existences, he would only have a headache. It's just that I have the power of the strongest sword elf, and Lotus has the power of the dark elf king. In addition to endless divine power, only then can they reach 4 digits. If that masked elven envoy can also reach 4 digits, then what is she relying on? Noah's brows slightly furrowed. Even if she contracted with a mythical level elf, she shouldn't be able to reach 4 digits, right? Although mythical level elves were second only to the Elven King, compared to the Elven King who governed the elements that made up the entire world, it was estimated that the difference was more than just a little. Even if she contracted a mythical level elf, it was already very strong to reach 5 digits. No matter what, she shouldn't be able to reach 4 digits. But if Red Lotus was only at 5 digits, it was absolutely impossible for her to be so calm in front of Noah and Lotus, who had exploded with 4-digit power. There must be something I don't know, Noah asserted. This trip was indeed the right one. To be able to test Lotus's general strength and learn some of Red Lotus's abilities. This trip was already very rewarding for Noah. Moreover, Noah could also be sure that among the Purgatory Apostles, besides Lotus and Red Lotus, there was no third person that he needed to pay attention to. To be able to obtain this information, that's enough. Although he still didn't know what Red Lotus's specific strength and reliance was, as long as the fairy sword dance was not stopped sooner or later, Noah would have to face her. When that time comes, everything will naturally be revealed. Thinking about this, Noah was just about to lift his feet and leave when the fairy device in his hand suddenly lit up and turned into a burst of light particles. Immediately after, Aster appeared from the light particles. Aster! Noah was slightly stunned. He didn't expect Aster to suddenly appear. Master! Aster, on the other hand, had a very rare hesitant look, a pair of mysterious eyes filled with uncertainty. Seeing this, Noah was somewhat suspicious. He reached out his hand, touched Aster's head and asked, "What's wrong?" Hearing this, Aster still looked a little hesitant. But after a while, Aster lifted his head, looked at Noah and said, "What do you think? The masked fairy envoy gave me a very familiar feeling." A very familiar feeling? Noah was stunned and was surprised. "Do you know the masked fairy envoy?" "No, in my memory, I have never seen a fairy envoy with such a scorching aura." Aster shook his head. "But, in that person's aura I do feel a very familiar feeling." Saying this, Aster slowly lowered his head as he muttered in a low voice, "That feeling is exactly the same as Alicia Edith's." With this, Noah's expression slightly changed. He was surprised. Alicia Edith. This name to the people of this world was like thunder in their ears. Because this girl once annihilated the Demon King, saved the continent, and was called the Saintess of Salvation. In other words, she was Aster's previous master. Other than Noah, she was recognized by Aster, but also died because of Aster's curse. That masked fairy envoy had the aura of the Saintess of Salvation? How could that be? Are you sure? Noah's expression became serious. Did you really feel the aura of the Saintess of Salvation from that masked fairy envoy? Maybe it's just an illusion. For the first time, Aster became extremely hesitant and unconfident. That fairy envoy's aura is very different from my previous master's. Moreover, Alicia should have died because of my curse. Noah could clearly hear it. Aster's voice was extremely shaken. Obviously, the aura of the Saintess of Salvation from Red Lotus caused Aster's heart to be greatly confused. Looking at Aster, Noah was a little worried. He squatted down and kept his eyes parallel to Aster's. He stared at Aster and said softly, "Are you okay?" Under Noah's worried gaze, Aster's heart calmed down. "I am Master Sword." Aster met Noah's gaze. "Whether that person is Alicia or not, this will not change." Noah smiled and did not speak. He reached out and hugged Aster, silently comforting him. Aster also reached out his hand and hugged Noah tightly, trying to calm himself down. Chapter 1776. In a relatively remote corner of the forest there was a relatively small lake. Beside the lake was a lawn. On the lawn, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, Alice, and the other girls had set up their tents. There was even a bonfire in the center slowly burning. This was the camp of the fairy tale team. The surrounding area had already been set up by Fayanna, turning into a solid stronghold for the team. Staying in this stronghold, the members of the fairy tale team would not only receive all kinds of protection, but their strength would also increase by leaps and bounds. Even their divine power would be continuously replenished as supplies. Moreover, Phaena had set up various traps in the surroundings. Together with Claire, Linley, and Alice, the three of them had all the elves in the surrounding area under their control and had them resist any intruders. In less than a day, she was able to set up so many powerful and varied barriers. From this, one could see Phaena's ability. As a former fairy maiden candidate, Phaena's ability in this aspect was indeed unquestionable. However, Phaena herself was not very satisfied with the current results. She said that there were still many barriers to be set up, and there were still many things to be done. After tomorrow, this stronghold would be truly finished. Regarding this, the members of the fairy tale team naturally did not have any objections, leaving all of them to Phaena. As for the rest of the girls, they would help Phaena adjust the surrounding elves, making them display the effect of resisting the invaders, while also taking care of the rest of the work. Claire was in charge of chores in the camp, such as collecting firewood, picking wild fruits, and hunting game, ensuring the operation of the camp. Linley was in charge of the meals in the camp, ensuring that the members of the team had 3 meals a day. Alice was in charge of scouting outside the camp, investigating the movements of the other teams. And in the assignment, Noah was in charge of patrolling, eliminating some magic beasts hiding in the stronghold, ensuring the safety of the camp. Perhaps because everything that happened in the stronghold was private, there were no enslaved elves that could constantly send images back to the great sacrificial hall. Therefore, after the distribution of work, everyone could rest assured and recuperate here. They could even cleanse themselves in the water. Of course, it wasn't just Claire, Linley, Phaena, and Alice. There was also Noah, the male elf user. In light of this, Claire's group used stones to create a hot spring-like pool in a corner of the lake, and then set up a curtain around the pool. That was the place where the young girls would enter the water to wash their bodies. As for Noah, he was strictly forbidden from entering that place. These were all matters that had been decided before the camp was set up. Moreover, most of them were decided upon by Noah before the sword dance of the elves. Therefore, after arriving at this place, everyone moved swiftly and decisively. Before the sky turned dark, they set up the camp and set up a barrier. Only when the sky was almost dark did Noah arrive, allowing the group of girls to relax. After learning that Noah had gone to find trouble with the Purgatory Apostles, the group of girls was shocked beyond words. You went to find trouble with the Purgatory Apostles alone? Beside the bonfire, Claire seemed to be at a loss for words as she opened her mouth. I can't believe you could come back in one piece. I'm just going to say hello to them. Noah shrugged. Moreover, there are only 2 people in the Purgatory Apostles who can threaten me. The rest are not even worth mentioning. But that team has Rena Subble. Linley seemed to be at a loss for words. Others can't wait to avoid them, but you actually went to find them. It's not like there are no benefits. At least I obtained a lot of useful information. Now I can make some preparations. Noah scratched his face. No matter what, that Purgatory Apostle is a threat. Since I have the strength to break in, how can I not try? That's true. Phaena smiled bitterly. Perhaps you are the only one who has the ability and the courage to challenge a party with the strongest sword dancer. The one who shot down my spirit servant was a Purgatory Apostle, right? Alice bit her finger, somewhat unwilling to give up. It seems that I need to be more careful in the future. There seems to be an elven envoy from the Elfie clan in the Purgatory Apostles. Her investigative abilities aren't weak. If you want to bypass her and obtain information about the Purgatory Apostles, it won't be that easy. Noah said. Apart from that, the envoy called Moya is also in the Purgatory Apostles. From my deduction, she seems to be an expert specially trained to use military spirits. She should have a powerful military spirit in her hands. There's also a guy whose name I don't even know. However, he was insta-killed as soon as he appeared, so I didn't obtain any useful information. Insta-killed. The girls were all speechless. The elven envoys who were able to participate in the elven sword dance were all elites of their respective countries. Even if they weren't at Liena Subble's level, they wouldn't be weaker than them, right? For such an opponent to be insta-killed by Noah was too much of a blow to their confidence. Forget it. As for that person's information, we'll look into it later when we have the chance. Claire changed the topic. Don't forget, apart from the Purgatory Apostles, the other teams are also quite a threat. For example, the Dragon King Legion that represents the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia is a big enemy. Alice nodded in agreement. Although the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia is a bit weaker than the Ordizia Empire in terms of military power, they have won the Elven Sword Dance many times in the past. If they win again this time, under the protection of the Elven King, they will be able to catch up to the two most powerful countries on the continent, the Ordizia Empire and the Holy Georgia Kingdom. In addition, the Kurna Empire in the east of the continent also sent a team called the Four Gods. The elven envoys in that team have all contracted the divine beast elves that the country is proud of. They are very good at group tactics. Linley recalled the information in her head. It should be a strong team that isn't weaker than the Dragon King Legion. Of course, the Holy Georgia Kingdom's team also can't be ignored. Like the Ordizia Empire, they also obtained 3 spots to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. They are also a strong enemy, Phaeana reminded. Moreover, the leader of the Holy Georgia Kingdom's Holy Spirit Knights is Luminaris Saint Richette. That elven envoy might even have a hard time against the Dragon Duchess of the Dragon King Legion, right? Phaeana's words weren't without reason. Luminaris Saint Richette wasn't only a contracted elven with holy attributes, she was also the trump card of the Holy Georgia Kingdom. Moreover, this person had participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago. In the Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago, Luminaris overcame all the difficulties and finally lost to Rena Subble in the finals. She was only 1 step away from victory, Claire said emotionally. It is said that Luminaris has always been brooding over losing the finals 3 years ago. She is determined to defeat the strongest sword dancer in this Elven Sword Dance Festival. Noah also knew this person. Of course, Noah noticed Luminaris because this elf envoy was almost 20 years old. Only elven envoys under 20 years old could participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Therefore, Luminaris was the same as Noah, the oldest contestant in this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival. Apart from these teams, the other teams you need to pay attention to is the Broken Division, representing the Ruzabel Duchy. Alice said. The Ruzabel Duchy was created by a group of radicals who originally belonged to the Holy Georgia Kingdom after declaring independence. Although it is a new small country, the elven envoys in the Broken Division are all existences that have contracts with high-level holy elves. They are seen as a potential dark horse in this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival. Dark horse? Noah couldn't help but mutter. Then I would like to see a bit. Noah didn't expect this. This small wish would come true in the near future. Chapter 1777. Time passed by quietly. In the blink of an eye, the first day of the Elven Sword Dance Festival had come to an end. Today, when the sun rose, the entire forest presented a very peaceful atmosphere. The tension from yesterday was completely gone. That was only natural. After all, there were no more than 3 people in the other teams who could match up to Phaeana's ability. Therefore, when Phaeana built a strong stronghold for the team's camp so that her companions could rest peacefully at night, the other teams had to work through the night in order to build their strongholds. Under such circumstances, the elven envoys of the other teams would definitely not have the energy to immediately take action. Most likely, they would be hiding in their strongholds to rest. This way, the forest would naturally not be as lively as yesterday. Instead, it was as if nothing had happened. Seemed so peaceful. No one knew when this peace would be broken. However, Noah indeed had a good night's sleep. When the sun rose, Noah slowly woke up. He looked at the top of the tent that entered his sight as soon as he opened his eyes. He stretched and sat up. Beside Noah, the silver and platinum daggers were lying there. Although the luster on the daggers had been restrained, they still gave off a profound feeling. Looking at the silver and platinum daggers lying there, especially the silver dagger, Noah sighed. She really cares about it? Usually, when there was no one beside Noah to sleep, Aster would most likely transform into her human form and burrow into Noah's arms naked to sleep comfortably. Today, there were no signs of Aster appearing at all. It was obvious that yesterday's matter had affected this elven girl to some extent. Saintess of Salvation Alicia Edith. Noah stretched out his hand and lightly brushed the silver dagger. The image of Red Lotus wearing a mask appeared in his mind. Even if we don't consider the problem of Aster's curse, the Saintess of Salvation was active at least a few hundred years ago. No matter how I think about it, that person can't be the Saintess, right? However, Noah did not doubt Aster's feelings. No matter what, other than Noah, the Saintess of Salvation was the only contractor in Aster's life. Furthermore, she died because of Aster's curse, so Aster wouldn't mistake her aura. However, Aster also said that Red Lotus's temperament was very different from the previous owner in her memory. It was just that there was a faint feeling of a saintess in her aura. Therefore, no matter how he thought about it, Red Lotus could not be the Saintess of Salvation. However, Red Lotus definitely had some sort of connection with the Saintess of Salvation. This was Noah's idea. The secrets behind this must be deeper than I thought, right? Noah sighed again. We can only take one step at a time. After saying this, Noah turned his head and lightly stroked the body of the small silver sword, as if he was talking to himself. No matter what, you still have me. Perhaps it heard Noah's words, but the small silver sword's body faintly glowed as if it was responding to Noah. Noah smiled and picked up the two small swords. He placed them in the scabbard at his waist and covered them with the uniform of the Elven Academy. Then he stood up and walked out of the tent. Today's weather was not as gloomy as yesterday. Although there was still some fog in the air, the sun was gradually shining down from the clouds. It was believed that the fog would dissipate in no time. When Noah came out of his tent, the first thing he smelled was the burnt smell of an extinguished bonfire, followed by a burst of fragrance. What's that smell? Noah, who was attracted by the fragrance, turned his head and looked in the direction of the lake. There, a young girl was humming a song while getting water. She was busying herself by the lakeside. Hum 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 hum. Under the rather pleasant humming, the young girl's luxurious light golden hair emitted a dazzling luster under the sunlight. Just like in the dormitory, Lindsay Lay wore an apron outside her uniform. With a nimble technique that did not match the status of a rich young lady, she set up a piece of wood and used it as a chopping board. She was in a very good mood as she used a kitchen knife to cut wild fruits. Beside Lindsay Lay there was a simple platform. The section of a large tree was used as a cooking table, and stones were piled up to form a stove. On the side, there were ice cubes used to preserve the fish caught from the lake. It should be a product created by Lindsay Lay using the ice attribute magic that she was good at. Of course, making these things naturally meant that she wanted to cook. She's so skilled at cooking in the wild. Is that girl really a rich young lady? Noah exclaimed. But I have to say, Lindsay Lay is quite virtuous. Sighing, Noah deliberately lightened his footsteps and came behind Lindsay Lay. Hum 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 hum. Lindsay Lay did not seem to notice Noah's approach at all. She was still in a very good mood as she used her nimble technique to cut wild fruits and vegetables there. Looking at this scene, Noah's gaze involuntarily moved to Lindsay Lay's ears. Those sparkling snow-like ears last time, because of Noah's prank, were very happily dyed red. Speaking of which, ears seemed to be Lindsay Lay's sensitive point. Thinking of this, Noah had the urge to prank her again. But thinking of the tragedy that resulted from the prank last time, Noah hurriedly dispelled this idea. He reached out his hand and patted Lindsay Lay's shoulder. Ah! Lindsay Lay suddenly let out a cute cry. Her shoulders shook and she turned her head fiercely. Who is it? It's me. Noah looked at Lindsay Lay's frightened look and could not help but laugh. Why are you so timid? Who allowed you to approach me without making a sound? I didn't even hear your footsteps. Lindsay Lay was a little angry. Then she remembered what happened last time. Her pretty face blushed and she covered her ears. Don't tell me you want to blow air into my ears again? Looking at Lindsay Lay's blushing face staring at him, Noah was amused. I just had that thought, but I immediately dismissed it. I don't want to kiss you again. Really? Lindsay Lay was a little relieved. Then she was slightly startled and became angry again. But what do you mean you don't want to kiss me again? Am I really that annoying? That's not it. Noah directly denied. I actually have quite a good impression of you. Lindsay Lay was startled again. Then her pretty face blushed again. She lowered her head and looked at her fingers. Is that so? Looking at Lindsay Lay's bashful look, Noah really felt a rush of excitement. This girl, upon closer inspection, was actually quite cute. After such a thought appeared, Noah couldn't help but be shocked. He hurriedly shook his head and dispelled the crooked thoughts in his head. Then, he evaded the topic and changed the topic. Alright, where are the others? Claire went to pick wild fruits. Alice is still using the wind elves to scout the movements of the other teams. As for Fayanna, she should be perfecting the boundary, right? Lindsay Lay's attention seemed to have been diverted. The blush on her face dissipated a lot. She answered honestly. The meal will be ready soon. When the time comes, you can go and inform everyone to come and eat. No problem. Noah nodded straightforwardly. It was also at this moment that Alice, who had used the flying elven magic, slowly floated down from the air and arrived in front of Noah and Lindsay Lay. As if sensing the strange atmosphere between Noah and Lindsay Lay, Alice frowned slightly. What are you doing? Hearing this, before Noah could say anything, Lindsay Lay seemed to have a guilty conscience and shook her head desperately. No. Nothing. How could there be anything? Ahaha. Not to mention Alice, even Noah wanted to tell Lindsay that if she said that, it would seem very suspicious. In order to avoid more trouble, Noah stepped forward and cut to the chase. Looking at how hurried you are, did something happen? That's right. Alice's expression became solemn as she said this. There's a team rushing towards us. Instantly, Noah and Lindsay Lay were stunned.